Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Officer Sarah Rodriguez had been patrolling Manhattan's Lower East Side for 3 years when she first noticed the anomaly that would consume her life for the next 18 months. Working the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, she'd grown accustomed to the predictable rhythms of the city's nighttime economy. The restaurant workers heading home, the late-night commuters emerging from subway stations, the steady flow of delivery drivers navigating the maze of one-way streets with practiced efficiency. But on a sweltering Tuesday night in July 2019, Rodriguez observed something that didn't fit the established patterns of nocturnal New York behavior. At 2:43 a.m., while conducting a routine patrol through the Alphabet City section of her beat, Rodriguez noticed a man in his 30s walking slowly down Avenue B, carrying what appeared to be a large duffel bag. Nothing unusual in itself. The neighborhood attracted all types at all hours. But something about his movement pattern triggered her training in behavioral observation. The man wasn't walking with the purposeful stride of someone heading home from work, or the casual pace of someone out for a late-night stroll. He was moving with deliberate calculation, stopping every few buildings to examine doorways, fire escapes, and ground-floor windows with the systematic attention of someone conducting surveillance. Rodriguez pulled her patrol car to the curb and observed the subject for several minutes through her passenger side mirror. The man's behavior became increasingly suspicious as he produced a small notebook and appeared to be documenting specific details about each building he examined, taking notes about security features, lighting conditions, and the presence or absence of doormen or security cameras. When the subject began attempting to access the rear courtyard of a residential building through an unlocked service gate, Rodriguez decided to make contact. NYPD, "Can I speak with you for a moment?" The man turned, showing no signs of surprise or alarm at being approached by police. He was average height and build, wearing dark clothing and carrying a worn canvas bag that appeared to contain various tools or equipment. His demeanor was calm, almost professional, as he responded to Rodriguez's approach. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" "I've been watching you for the past few minutes. You seem to be examining buildings and taking notes. Can you explain what you're doing in this area?" The man's response was so perfectly reasonable that it almost disarmed Rodriguez's suspicion entirely. "I'm a freelance security consultant. I've been contracted to assess vulnerabilities in residential buildings for an insurance company. I do most of my work at night because it's easier to identify lighting problems and security gaps when it's dark." He produced business cards and what appeared to be official documentation supporting his explanation. The paperwork looked legitimate. Professional letterhead, official-seeming language, contact information for references that could presumably be verified during business hours. "Can I see some identification?" Rodriguez asked, maintaining professional courtesy while following standard procedure. The man provided a New York driver's license identifying him as David Morse, age 34, with an address in Queens. The license appeared authentic, and his appearance matched the photograph. His explanation for being in the neighborhood was plausible, and his documentation seemed legitimate. But Rodriguez's 3 years of experience working Manhattan's nighttime streets had taught her to trust subtle instincts that couldn't be easily rationalized. Something about the encounter felt rehearsed, as if Morse had prepared for exactly this type of police contact and had developed responses designed to deflect further investigation. "Mr. Morse, I'm going to need you to empty your bag so I can verify that you're carrying the type of equipment consistent with security consulting work." The request was reasonable under the circumstances, and Morse complied without hesitation. The bag contained items that supported his stated profession: a digital camera, measuring tape, a small flashlight, notebooks filled with what appeared to be security assessments, and various tools that could be used for testing locks, windows, and security systems. Everything about the encounter suggested a legitimate professional conducting authorized work in accordance with his claimed occupation. Rodriguez returned Morse's identification and documentation, advised him to carry proper authorization letters when working in residential areas to avoid future police contacts, and released him to continue his activities. But as she drove away, Rodriguez couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just encountered something significant that she hadn't properly understood. Morse's explanations had been too perfect, his documentation too convenient, his preparation for police contact too thorough for someone engaged in routine security consulting. Over the next several nights, Rodriguez found herself paying closer attention to late-night pedestrian activity in her patrol sector, looking for patterns or anomalies that might indicate coordinated surveillance or reconnaissance activities. Her heightened awareness was rewarded 3 nights later when she spotted Morse again, this time in a different neighborhood, engaged in similar building examination activities. The second encounter confirmed Rodriguez's suspicion that Morse's activities were more extensive and systematic than his initial explanation suggested. He was conducting detailed reconnaissance of residential buildings across multiple neighborhoods, documenting security vulnerabilities with a thoroughness that exceeded what would be necessary for routine insurance assessments. Rodriguez began documenting her observations of Morse's activities, creating a file that would grow over the following weeks as she tracked his movements and gradually understood the scope of his operations. What she discovered would eventually expose a criminal enterprise that had been operating undetected in New York City for over 2 years, exploiting exactly the type of systematic vulnerabilities that Morse was documenting during his nocturnal reconnaissance missions. But first, Rodriguez had to overcome the challenge of investigating someone whose activities appeared entirely legal, and whose explanations were consistently plausible to supervisors who hadn't observed the subtle patterns that were becoming increasingly apparent to her trained eye. Rodriguez's growing suspicion about David Morse's activities led her to conduct unauthorized surveillance during her off-duty hours, a decision that violated department policy but reflected her conviction that she was observing something significant that required investigation. Using her personal vehicle and civilian clothes, Rodriguez began tracking Morse's movements across Manhattan during the late-night hours when his activities were most active. What she discovered was a systematic operation that covered far more territory and involved more sophisticated planning than she had initially realized. Morse wasn't working alone. Rodriguez identified at least 3 other individuals engaged in similar reconnaissance activities across different neighborhoods in Manhattan and the outer boroughs. Each person followed the same methodology: systematic examination of residential buildings, detailed documentation of security features, and coordination of activities to avoid duplication of effort. The scope of their operation became clearer as Rodriguez mapped their activities across the city. They were conducting comprehensive security assessments of hundreds of residential buildings, creating what amounted to a detailed vulnerability database for high-value residential targets throughout New York. Rodriguez's investigation was complicated by the fact that she couldn't officially document her surveillance activities without explaining why she was conducting unauthorized investigations during her off-duty time. Her supervisors would require justification for the resources and time she was investing in what appeared to be surveillance of individuals engaged in legitimate business activities. The breakthrough came when Rodriguez observed Morse meeting with two other individuals in a 24-hour diner on the Lower East Side at 3:30 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. The meeting lasted 47 minutes and involved detailed discussion of specific buildings, with participants consulting notebooks and what appeared to be building floor plans or architectural drawings. Rodriguez positioned herself where she could observe the meeting without being detected, using her phone to photograph the participants and document their interaction. The level of coordination and detailed planning evident in their discussion convinced her that this was something significantly more sophisticated than routine security consulting. Following the meeting, Rodriguez tracked one of the other participants to a storage facility in Queens, where he accessed a unit containing what appeared to be extensive files, maps, and equipment that suggested a much larger operation than the freelance security consulting that Morse had described. Rodriguez faced a critical decision about how to proceed with her investigation. The evidence she had gathered through unauthorized surveillance might not be admissible in court, and her supervisors might question her methods if she couldn't provide legitimate justification for her activities. But her concern about the scope and sophistication of what she was observing outweighed her worry about potential disciplinary action. Rodriguez decided to contact Detective Lieutenant Michael Santos, a supervisor known for supporting proactive police work and encouraging officers to investigate suspicious patterns even when they couldn't immediately articulate specific crimes. "Lieutenant, I've been tracking some individuals who appear to be conducting systematic reconnaissance of residential buildings across multiple neighborhoods. Their activities are technically legal, but the scope and coordination suggest something beyond legitimate security consulting." Santos listened to Rodriguez's description of her observations and reviewed the photographs and notes she had accumulated during her surveillance activities. His experience with organized crime investigations helped him recognize patterns that suggested criminal enterprise rather than legitimate business activities. "Officer Rodriguez, what you're describing sounds like intelligence gathering for a sophisticated burglary or home invasion operation. The systematic documentation of security vulnerabilities across multiple neighborhoods suggests preparation for coordinated criminal activities." Santos authorized Rodriguez to continue her investigation with official departmental support, assigning additional resources to help track the suspected reconnaissance network and identify their ultimate objectives. The investigation was classified as a potential organized crime operation, allowing access to specialized surveillance equipment and coordination with other law enforcement agencies. The expanded investigation revealed that Morse and his associates were part of a larger criminal organization that specialized in high-value residential burglaries, targeting wealthy individuals in Manhattan and the outer boroughs. Their reconnaissance activities were designed to identify properties with valuable contents, minimal security measures, and predictable occupancy patterns that would allow safe access during specific time windows. But the true scope of their operation was even more disturbing than Rodriguez had initially suspected. The organization wasn't just planning burglaries. They were conducting comprehensive intelligence gathering that included monitoring residents' daily routines, financial activities, and personal relationships to identify optimal targets and timing for their operations. Rodriguez's investigation had uncovered a criminal enterprise that represented a new evolution in organized burglary operations, using professional-level intelligence gathering techniques to identify and exploit vulnerabilities in New York's residential security infrastructure. The expanded investigation into David Morse's reconnaissance network revealed an operation of unprecedented sophistication in the history of New York residential crime. Working with Detective Lieutenant Santos and a team of investigators from the NYPD's Organized Crime Control Bureau, Rodriguez helped expose a criminal enterprise that had been systematically mapping Manhattan's residential vulnerabilities for over 18 months. The organization operated like a professional intelligence service, with different teams responsible for specific aspects of target identification, surveillance, intelligence gathering, and operational planning. Morse's role was just one component of a comprehensive system designed to identify high-value residential targets and develop detailed operational plans for accessing them during optimal time windows. What we're looking at, Lieutenant Santos explained during a briefing for the expanded investigation team, is essentially a criminal intelligence agency specializing in residential targets. They're using techniques and technologies that rival what we see in corporate espionage and foreign intelligence operations. The investigation revealed that the organization employed multiple surveillance teams that monitored potential targets' daily routines, travel schedules, and personal activities. They used sophisticated tracking technology, social media monitoring, and even financial intelligence gathering to build comprehensive profiles of wealthy individuals and families throughout Manhattan. Rodriguez's tracking of Morse had led to the discovery of a centralized intelligence operation based in a seemingly legitimate security consulting business in Queens. The business served as cover for extensive databases containing detailed information about hundreds of residential properties, their occupants, security systems, valuable contents, and optimal access strategies. They know more about some of these families than the families know about themselves, Detective Angela Chen, a specialist in financial crimes, observed while reviewing the organization's intelligence files. They have credit reports, travel itineraries, work schedules, social media activity, even information about domestic staff and service providers who have access to these homes. The scope of the intelligence gathering operation was staggering. The organization had infiltrated various service industries that provided access to wealthy residential properties, cleaning services, maintenance companies, catering businesses, and security firms. They used these positions to gather inside information about property layouts, security systems, valuable collections, and residents' personal habits. Rodriguez's investigation had also revealed that the organization was selling intelligence to other criminal groups, specializing in different types of operations. The comprehensive residential intelligence they gathered was valuable not just for burglary operations, but also for kidnapping, extortion, and other crimes targeting wealthy individuals and families. This isn't just about stealing property, Lieutenant Santos realized as the investigation uncovered the full scope of the intelligence operation. They're creating a comprehensive vulnerability assessment of Manhattan's wealthy residential community that could be used for various types of criminal exploitation. The organization's operational security was sophisticated enough to have avoided detection by traditional law enforcement methods. They used encrypted communications, compartmentalized information sharing, and professional surveillance detection techniques to protect their activities from police investigation. Rodriguez's chance encounter with Morse had been the crucial break in identifying an operation that might otherwise have continued undetected for years, gradually building intelligence capabilities that could have been used for increasingly serious crimes against high-profile targets. The investigation team decided to conduct a coordinated operation designed to disrupt the entire intelligence network simultaneously, preventing the organization from destroying evidence or relocating their operations once they realized they were under law enforcement scrutiny. Rodriguez played a crucial role in the operational planning, using her detailed knowledge of Morse's activities and the organization's reconnaissance patterns to help identify optimal timing and tactics for the coordinated arrests. Officer Rodriguez, your initial observations and persistence in investigating suspicious but technically legal activities have been crucial to exposing this operation, Lieutenant Santos told her during the pre-operation briefing. This investigation demonstrates the importance of trusting police instincts even when the evidence doesn't initially support obvious criminal charges. The coordinated operation would target multiple locations simultaneously: the Queen's headquarters, various surveillance teams operating throughout Manhattan, and storage facilities containing the organization's extensive intelligence databases and operational equipment. But Rodriguez also understood that the investigation had revealed vulnerabilities in residential security that extended far beyond this particular criminal organization. The systematic intelligence gathering techniques they had developed could be replicated by other groups, and the information they had collected about Manhattan's wealthy residents represented a continuing security threat even after the immediate criminal enterprise was disrupted. "We're not just arresting a burglary ring," Rodriguez observed during the final planning meetings. "We're uncovering intelligence-gathering capabilities that could be used for much more serious crimes if this information falls into the wrong hands, or if other organizations develop similar techniques." The investigation had transformed Rodriguez from a patrol officer responding to routine calls into a specialist in recognizing and investigating sophisticated criminal intelligence operations. Her experience would become valuable for training other officers to identify similar threats and for developing countermeasures to protect high-value residential targets from systematic surveillance and intelligence gathering. The coordinated law enforcement operation that resulted from Rodriguez's investigation took place simultaneously across 17 locations throughout New York City on a Thursday morning in November 2019. Rodriguez participated in the raid on the Queen's headquarters, where the true scope of the criminal intelligence operation was finally revealed. The facility appeared to be a legitimate security consulting business, complete with professional offices, reception areas, and conference rooms that could have passed any casual inspection. But hidden behind false walls and in secured basement areas, investigators discovered an intelligence operation that rivaled anything seen in traditional organized crime or corporate espionage cases. "Jesus Christ," Detective Chen whispered as she surveyed the intelligence center's main operations room. "This looks like something out of a spy movie." The walls were covered with detailed maps of Manhattan marked with hundreds of residential properties, each coded with symbols indicating wealth levels, security measures, occupancy patterns, and operational vulnerability assessments. Computer workstations displayed sophisticated databases containing personal information about thousands of individuals and families throughout the city. Rodriguez examined files that contained disturbingly detailed intelligence about specific targets. One folder dedicated to a prominent businessman included photographs of his family members, copies of his children's school schedules, detailed floor plans of his penthouse apartment, information about his domestic staff, and even analysis of his personal relationships and potential vulnerabilities. "They know everything about these people," Rodriguez observed, reviewing another file that contained financial records, travel itineraries, and personal correspondence that had been somehow obtained through various infiltration methods. "This goes way beyond what you'd need for a simple burglary operation." Lieutenant Santos coordinated with federal agents who had been called in to assist with the investigation once the scope of the intelligence operation became clear. The sophisticated nature of the surveillance and data gathering suggested possible connections to organized crime families or even foreign intelligence services interested in gathering information about wealthy American citizens. The arrest operation yielded 16 individuals, including David Morse and the other surveillance operatives that Rodriguez had identified during her investigation. But interrogation of the suspects revealed that the organization was even larger than law enforcement had realized, with additional cells operating in other cities and coordination with criminal networks across multiple states. "This appears to be a franchised operation," FBI Special Agent Rebecca Martinez explained during the post-arrest briefing. The New York cell was just one component of a national network that specializes in residential intelligence gathering for various criminal purposes. The intelligence databases seized during the raids contained information about over 3,000 residential properties and more than 8,000 individuals throughout the New York metropolitan area. The level of detail was extraordinary. Some files contained information that even close family members wouldn't typically know about the targets. Rodriguez's review of the databases revealed that her own apartment building had been surveilled and assessed, along with information about her work schedule, personal relationships, and daily routines. The discovery that she had been under surveillance while investigating the organization added a personal dimension to her understanding of their capabilities. They identified you as a potential threat early in your investigation, Lieutenant Santos told Rodriguez when the surveillance of her own activities was discovered. The fact that they continued their operations despite knowing you were watching suggests either arrogance or confidence that their legal cover would protect them from police investigation. The investigation also revealed that the organization had successfully conducted numerous high-value burglaries and other crimes using the intelligence they had gathered. Property crimes totaling over $15 million in value were eventually connected to their operations, but the true scope of their criminal activities was likely much larger. More disturbing was the discovery that they had been selling intelligence to other criminal organizations specializing in kidnapping, extortion, and identity theft. The residential surveillance network had created a marketplace for criminal intelligence that enabled various types of crimes against wealthy targets throughout the city. "We've disrupted one network," Agent Martinez cautioned during the investigation debrief. But the techniques they developed and the intelligence they gathered represent continuing threats. Other organizations could use similar methods, and the information they collected about these families doesn't disappear just because we've arrested the people who gathered it. Rodriguez's role in the investigation had evolved from patrol officer to specialist consultant, helping federal agents understand the operational methods and surveillance techniques that the organization had used. Her detailed knowledge of their reconnaissance patterns was crucial to identifying additional criminal activities and understanding how similar networks might operate in the future. The case also highlighted vulnerabilities in residential security that extended far beyond traditional law enforcement concerns. The organization had exploited gaps between private security measures and public law enforcement capabilities, operating in spaces where their activities appeared legal but were actually components of sophisticated criminal enterprises. Officer Rodriguez, your instincts and persistence in investigating activities that appeared legal but felt wrong have been crucial to exposing this operation, Agent Martinez told her during the case conclusion briefing. This investigation demonstrates the importance of trusting police intuition, even when the evidence doesn't obviously support criminal charges. The success of the investigation led to Rodriguez being assigned to a specialized unit focusing on identifying and investigating sophisticated criminal surveillance operations. Her experience became the foundation for training programs designed to help other officers recognize similar threats and develop techniques for investigating organized intelligence gathering activities. But the personal impact of learning that she had been under surveillance throughout her investigation remained troubling. The knowledge that her daily routines, personal relationships, and professional activities had been monitored and documented by sophisticated criminal adversaries created lasting concerns about privacy and security that affected her approach to both police work and personal life. 6 months after the coordinated arrests that dismantled the residential intelligence network, Rodriguez found herself working with federal agencies to understand the broader implications of what they had discovered. The investigation had revealed not just a criminal enterprise, but a new category of organized crime that exploited the intersection of technology, social media, and urban residential vulnerability. the intelligence databases seized during the raids continued to yield disturbing discoveries, as analysts worked through the massive amount of information the organization had accumulated. The depth and accuracy of their surveillance was unprecedented in civilian law enforcement experience, raising questions about how such comprehensive intelligence gathering had been conducted without detection. They had better information about some of these families than their own security services did, Detective Chen observed during a briefing on the ongoing analysis. They knew things about daily routines, family relationships, and personal vulnerabilities that would have required months of intensive surveillance for each target. The investigation revealed that the organization had infiltrated numerous service industries that provided legitimate access to wealthy residential properties. Cleaning services, maintenance companies, security firms, catering businesses, and even dog-walking services had been penetrated by operatives who used their positions to gather intelligence about clients and their properties. Rodriguez worked with federal agents to identify and interview these infiltrators, many of whom had been recruited through legitimate employment, but gradually corrupted through financial incentives to provide additional information about their wealthy clients. The scary part, Rodriguez explained during a training session for residential security professionals, is how they exploited normal business relationships to gather intelligence. People trusted them because they were providing legitimate services, but that trust was being systematically abused to collect information for criminal purposes. The psychological profiles of the organization's operatives revealed sophisticated recruitment and training methods that selected individuals based on their ability to blend into various social and professional environments. Many had backgrounds in legitimate security, investigation, or service industries that provided cover for their intelligence-gathering activities. Rodriguez's analysis of their operational methods led to the development of new training programs for law enforcement agencies, focusing on recognizing sophisticated surveillance operations that used legal business activities as cover for criminal intelligence gathering. Traditional police training focuses on obvious criminal behavior, Rodriguez told a gathering of law enforcement professionals. But these operators were conducting criminal reconnaissance using methods that appeared completely legitimate. We need to develop new instincts for recognizing systematic intelligence gathering that's disguised as normal business activities. The federal investigation also revealed connections between the New York network and similar operations in other major cities. The organizational model was being replicated across the country, creating a national infrastructure for criminal intelligence gathering that targeted wealthy residential communities in multiple states. FBI analysis suggested that the residential surveillance networks were components of a larger criminal ecosystem that included money laundering operations, international organized crime connections, and even potential foreign intelligence interests in gathering information about wealthy American citizens. We're looking at organized crime evolution, Agent Martinez explained during a multi-agency briefing. Traditional organized crime focused on specific criminal activities: drugs, gambling, extortion. These networks are creating criminal intelligence capabilities that can be applied to multiple types of operations. Rodriguez's experience investigating the network led to her assignment to a joint federal-local task force, focusing on identifying and disrupting similar operations before they could establish comprehensive intelligence gathering capabilities. The personal impact of the investigation continued to affect Rodriguez's daily life as she adapted to the knowledge that sophisticated criminal surveillance could target law enforcement officers who posed threats to their operations. Enhanced security measures became necessary to protect her from potential retaliation. The hardest part, Rodriguez told the police psychologist during mandatory counseling sessions, is that I can never completely trust that normal interactions are actually normal. Every service provider, every casual encounter, Every routine transaction could potentially be someone gathering intelligence about my activities or vulnerabilities. The investigation had also revealed the extent to which social media and digital communications could be exploited for criminal intelligence gathering. The organization had sophisticated capabilities for monitoring online activities, analyzing social networks, and using digital footprints to predict targets' behaviors and identify optimal times for criminal operations. Rodriguez worked with cybercrime specialists to understand how digital surveillance integrated with physical reconnaissance to create comprehensive target profiles. The combination of online monitoring and traditional surveillance techniques had enabled the organization to achieve unprecedented levels of intelligence about their targets. They knew when people would be home, when they'd be traveling, what valuables they owned, who had access to their properties, and even personal information that could be used for social engineering or extortion, Rodriguez explained during a presentation on digital security. The integration of online and offline surveillance created intelligence capabilities that individual investigators couldn't achieve using traditional methods. The training programs that emerged from Rodriguez's investigation emphasized the importance of recognizing patterns in seemingly legitimate activities that might indicate systematic intelligence gathering. Law enforcement agencies across the country implemented new protocols for identifying and investigating sophisticated surveillance operations. But the investigation also highlighted fundamental vulnerabilities in urban residential security that couldn't be addressed through law enforcement alone. The organization had exploited gaps between individual security measures and systemic protection that required coordination between private security services, law enforcement agencies, and residential communities. We can arrest individual criminal networks, Rodriguez observed during policy discussions with city officials, but the vulnerabilities they exploited remain. Wealthy residential communities need better coordination between private security and public law enforcement to detect and prevent systematic intelligence gathering operations. 2 years after the original investigation, Rodriguez was contacted by federal cybercrime specialists who had detected what appeared to be the next evolution of the residential surveillance networks she had helped expose. The new operations had adapted to law enforcement countermeasures by shifting toward digital intelligence gathering that was even more difficult to detect and investigate. They've gone largely digital, FBI Cyber Division agent David Park explained during a briefing at the federal building in Lower Manhattan. Instead of physical surveillance and infiltration of service industries, they're using sophisticated online techniques to gather the same types of intelligence about wealthy targets. The new networks had developed artificial intelligence systems that could monitor social media activities, analyze financial transactions, track digital communications, and even monitor smart home devices to gather comprehensive intelligence about potential targets without requiring physical presence or human infiltration. Rodriguez studied examples of the new digital surveillance techniques with growing concern about the implications for both law enforcement and residential security. The artificial intelligence systems could process vast amounts of digital information to identify patterns and vulnerabilities that would have required armies of human operatives using traditional methods. They can monitor someone's entire digital life, Agent Park explained, showing Rodriguez examples of comprehensive profiles created using only online sources. Social media posts reveal travel schedules. Financial app usage indicates spending patterns. Smart home devices provide information about daily routines, and digital communications reveal personal relationships and potential vulnerabilities. The sophistication of the digital surveillance was remarkable in its comprehensiveness and efficiency. Artificial intelligence systems could analyze thousands of potential targets simultaneously, identifying the most valuable and vulnerable candidates for criminal operations without requiring the extensive human resources that physical surveillance networks had demanded. Rodriguez's expertise in recognizing systematic intelligence gathering patterns proved valuable for understanding how the digital operations functioned. But the new techniques presented challenges that traditional law enforcement methods were not equipped to address. The legal framework for investigating digital surveillance is much more complex than physical surveillance, Agent Park explained. Many of these techniques use information that's publicly available or obtained through methods that aren't obviously illegal, making it difficult to obtain warrants or build criminal cases. The investigation revealed that the digital surveillance networks were selling intelligence to various criminal organizations specializing in different types of operations. The comprehensive digital profiles they created were valuable for burglary operations, kidnapping planning, identity theft, financial fraud, and even espionage activities. Rodriguez worked with federal agents to develop new techniques for identifying and investigating digital surveillance networks, but the technical complexity of the operations required expertise that traditional law enforcement agencies lacked. We need cybercrime specialists who understand both the technical aspects of digital surveillance and the criminal applications of the intelligence being gathered, Rodriguez observed during planning meetings for the expanded investigation. The new digital networks had also internationalized their operations, using servers and infrastructure located in countries with limited law enforcement cooperation to protect their activities from American police investigation. The global nature of digital communications made it much more difficult to disrupt their operations using traditional law enforcement methods. Rodriguez's role in the investigation evolved toward developing training programs that could help law enforcement agencies recognize and investigate digital intelligence gathering operations. But she also recognized that the technical sophistication of the new threats exceeded the capabilities of local police departments. We're fighting a technological war with traditional law enforcement tools, Rodriguez told Lieutenant Santos during a discussion about resource allocation for cybercrime investigations. These organizations have artificial intelligence systems and international infrastructure that we can't match using conventional police techniques. The investigation also revealed that Rodriguez's own digital communications and online activities had been monitored by the new surveillance networks, which had identified her as a threat based on her previous investigation of their physical surveillance operations. Enhanced cybersecurity measures became necessary to protect Rodriguez from digital surveillance and potential cyber attacks. But the measures also highlighted how thoroughly modern life could be monitored and analyzed by sophisticated adversaries with appropriate technical capabilities. The digital evolution of these surveillance networks represents a fundamental shift in organized crime, Agent Park concluded during the investigation briefing. They're using artificial intelligence and global digital infrastructure to achieve intelligence gathering capabilities that exceed what physical surveillance networks could accomplish. Rodriguez's experience with both physical and digital surveillance networks made her a valuable consultant for federal agencies developing comprehensive approaches to protecting high-value targets from systematic intelligence gathering. But the evolution of the threats continued to outpace the development of effective countermeasures. The personal impact of learning that her digital life had been systematically monitored created additional stress and security concerns that affected her ability to maintain normal personal relationships and daily routines. I can't escape the feeling that I'm constantly being watched and analyzed, Rodriguez told the police psychologist during their sessions. Every digital interaction, every online activity, every electronic communication could potentially be monitored by sophisticated adversaries who see me as a threat to their operations. 3 years after her initial investigation, Rodriguez was recruited by Interpol to participate in an international task force investigating what had evolved into a global network of criminal intelligence operations targeting wealthy individuals and families across multiple countries. The investigation had revealed that the residential surveillance techniques pioneered in New York had been exported to criminal organizations throughout Europe, Asia, and Latin America, creating an international infrastructure for systematic intelligence gathering that threatened high-value targets worldwide. What you discovered in Manhattan was just one node in a global network, Interpol coordinator Elena Vasquez explained during Rodriguez's briefing at the organization's headquarters in Lyon, France. The operational methods and technologies have been replicated across dozens of countries, creating criminal intelligence capabilities that operate across international boundaries. The global nature of the network created jurisdictional challenges that traditional law enforcement agencies were not equipped to address. Criminal organizations could gather intelligence in one country, plan operations in another, and execute crimes in a third, using international boundaries to protect their activities from coordinated law enforcement response. Rodriguez's expertise in recognizing systematic intelligence gathering patterns was valuable for training international law enforcement agencies. But the cultural and legal differences between countries complicated efforts to develop unified approaches to investigating and disrupting global criminal surveillance networks. The techniques that worked for investigating the New York network don't necessarily translate to other legal systems and cultural contexts, Rodriguez observed during training sessions with European police agencies. We need to adapt our methods to work within different legal frameworks while maintaining the ability to recognize and investigate sophisticated surveillance operations. The international investigation revealed that the global network had developed specialized capabilities for targeting different types of high-value individuals based on regional characteristics and vulnerabilities. European operations focused on corporate executives and government officials. Asian networks targeted technology entrepreneurs and manufacturing leaders, while Latin American operations concentrated on natural resource industry figures and political leaders. Rodriguez worked with international colleagues to understand how cultural differences affected the operational methods used by criminal surveillance networks in different regions. But the fundamental principles of systematic intelligence gathering remained consistent across all areas. The core methodology is the same everywhere, Rodriguez explained during an international law enforcement conference. They identify high-value targets, gather comprehensive intelligence about their vulnerabilities, and develop detailed operational plans for exploiting that intelligence. The specific techniques vary based on local conditions, but the systematic approach is universal. The global investigation also revealed that the networks had developed sophisticated money laundering and asset protection systems that allowed them to move criminal proceeds across international boundaries while protecting their operational infrastructure from law enforcement disruption. Rodriguez's investigation experience became valuable for understanding how criminal intelligence operations integrated with broader organized crime activities. But the international scope of the networks required cooperation between agencies that had limited experience working together. We're trying to investigate global criminal organizations using law enforcement systems that were designed for local and national operations, Rodriguez observed during planning meetings for international coordination efforts. The criminals have adapted to globalization faster than law enforcement agencies have. The personal security challenges also increased as Rodriguez's international profile made her a target for criminal organizations operating across multiple countries. Enhanced security measures became necessary to protect her from potential threats that could originate from anywhere in the world. The global nature of these networks means that threats could come from any direction, the security specialist assigned to protect Rodriguez explained. Your expertise makes you valuable to law enforcement agencies worldwide, but it also makes you a target for criminal organizations that see you as a threat to their operations. The international investigation led to coordinated operations across 17 countries, resulting in hundreds of arrests and the disruption of criminal intelligence networks that had been operating for years without detection. But the success also revealed how quickly the networks could adapt and relocate their operations to avoid law enforcement disruption. "We've disrupted existing networks," Coordinator Vasquez explained during the post-operation briefing. But the operational methods and technologies they developed are being replicated by new organizations that learn from our enforcement actions and adapt their techniques to avoid detection. Rodriguez's role in the international investigation established her as a leading expert on criminal surveillance networks. But it also highlighted the ongoing nature of the threat and the need for continuous adaptation of law enforcement methods to address evolving criminal techniques. The global scope of the investigation had revealed that systematic intelligence gathering had become a foundational capability for modern organized crime, enabling various types of criminal operations while creating new categories of threats that traditional law enforcement methods struggled to address effectively. 4 years after her initial encounter with David Morse, Rodriguez found herself at the center of what federal agencies had begun calling the technology war, an escalating conflict between criminal organizations using advanced surveillance technologies and law enforcement agencies struggling to develop effective countermeasures. The criminal intelligence networks had evolved far beyond the physical and digital surveillance techniques that Rodriguez had originally investigated. They now employed artificial intelligence systems, quantum encryption, deepfake technology, and even satellite surveillance capabilities that rivaled those available to government intelligence agencies. "We're not just fighting criminals anymore," NSA liaison officer Colonel James Mitchell explained during a classified briefing at the Pentagon. "These organizations have developed intelligence capabilities that pose national security threats. They're using technologies that can penetrate government security systems and gather intelligence about officials, military personnel, and classified operations." Rodriguez's expertise in recognizing systematic surveillance patterns had made her valuable to national security agencies, investigating how criminal intelligence networks had acquired and deployed military-grade surveillance technologies. The investigation revealed connections between organized crime groups and foreign intelligence services that were sharing advanced surveillance capabilities. "The line between organized crime and espionage has disappeared," Colonel Mitchell continued. "Criminal organizations are conducting intelligence operations that serve both criminal purposes and foreign intelligence objectives. They're gathering information about American citizens, government officials, and military personnel that could be used for various types of hostile activities." The national security implications of advanced criminal surveillance required Rodriguez to receive security clearances and undergo extensive background investigations that reflected the sensitive nature of the threats being investigated. Her personal life became subject to continuous monitoring and security measures that protected her from threats while also restricting her freedom and privacy. Rodriguez worked with NSA technical specialists to understand how criminal organizations had acquired and deployed sophisticated surveillance technologies that were supposed to be restricted to government agencies. The investigation revealed a complex network of defense contractors, technology companies, and intelligence personnel who were providing advanced capabilities to criminal organizations. The same technologies that protect national security can be used to threaten it. Dr. Sarah Kim, an NSA technical analyst, explained during Rodriguez's security briefing. Quantum encryption can protect criminal communications from law enforcement interception. Artificial intelligence can analyze vast amounts of surveillance data to identify government vulnerabilities. Satellite surveillance can monitor military installations and government facilities. The technology war required Rodriguez to develop expertise in advanced surveillance methods that exceeded anything available to traditional law enforcement agencies. Her training included classified programs on quantum communications, artificial intelligence analysis, and satellite surveillance that reflected the sophisticated nature of the criminal threats being investigated. But the advanced technologies also created new vulnerabilities for law enforcement personnel like Rodriguez, who became targets for criminal organizations seeking to neutralize threats to their operations. The criminal networks had surveillance capabilities that could monitor law enforcement activities in real time, creating security challenges that required constant adaptation of protective measures. Your expertise makes you a high-value target for elimination or neutralization, the security specialist assigned to protect Rodriguez explained. These organizations have capabilities to monitor your communications, track your location, and potentially conduct operations against you using technologies that were originally developed for military applications. The investigation revealed that criminal intelligence networks had developed comprehensive files on law enforcement personnel, government officials, and military personnel who posed threats to their operations. The files contained detailed personal information, vulnerability assessments, and operational plans for neutralizing specific individuals through various means. Rodriguez's security file contained disturbing evidence of sophisticated surveillance that had monitored her activities, analyzed her personal relationships, and identified potential methods for eliminating her as a threat to their operations. The file included photographs taken without her knowledge, detailed analysis of her daily routines, and even psychological profiles designed to predict her responses to various types of pressure or manipulation. They know everything about you, Colonel Mitchell told Rodriguez during a security briefing. Your family members, your personal relationships, your financial situation, your professional vulnerabilities. They've conducted the same type of comprehensive intelligence gathering on you that they used against their criminal targets. The discovery that she had been under such intensive surveillance created a profound sense of violation that affected Rodriguez's ability to maintain normal personal relationships and daily routines. Every aspect of her life had been analyzed and documented by sophisticated adversaries who saw her as an obstacle to their criminal operations. Enhanced security measures included relocation to a secure housing facility, continuous protective surveillance, and restricted communication protocols that isolated Rodriguez from normal social interactions while protecting her from potential threats. The technology war has made traditional law enforcement obsolete, Rodriguez observed during a classified briefing on future threats. When criminal organizations have intelligence capabilities that exceed those available to local police departments, conventional policing methods become ineffective for investigating sophisticated criminal operations. The national security investigation led to the development of new law enforcement capabilities that integrated military and intelligence technologies with traditional police methods. Rodriguez became a consultant for programs designed to prepare law enforcement agencies for conflicts with criminal organizations using advanced surveillance and intelligence technologies. But the evolution of criminal capabilities continued to outpace the development of law enforcement countermeasures. Each advance in protective technology was met with corresponding improvements in criminal surveillance and intelligence gathering methods. We're fighting an arms race that we're losing, Rodriguez told federal officials during strategic planning meetings. Every defensive measure we develop prompts them to acquire more sophisticated offensive capabilities. They have access to the same advanced technologies that we're using to protect against them. The investigation also revealed that criminal intelligence networks were selling their surveillance capabilities to foreign intelligence services. creating national security threats that extended far beyond traditional organized crime activities. The comprehensive intelligence they gathered about American citizens, government officials, and military personnel was valuable to hostile foreign governments seeking to identify vulnerabilities in American security. Rodriguez's expertise became crucial to national security efforts to protect critical personnel from systematic surveillance and intelligence gathering. But the scope of the threat exceeded the capabilities of any single law enforcement agency or government department. The criminal intelligence networks have become a national security infrastructure that serves multiple hostile interests, Colonel Mitchell explained during congressional testimony on emerging threats. They're gathering intelligence that could be used for criminal operations, espionage activities, terrorism planning, or foreign influence operations. The personal cost of Rodriguez's involvement in the technology war included permanent separation from her previous life and relationships. The security measures necessary to protect her from sophisticated criminal surveillance required her to assume a new identity and relocate to a protected environment where her activities could be continuously monitored and secured. "I've become a prisoner of my own expertise," Rodriguez told the government psychologist assigned to help her adapt to her new circumstances. "My knowledge of criminal surveillance networks has made me a permanent target, but it's also made me too valuable to law enforcement and national security agencies to return to normal life." The ongoing nature of the technology war meant that Rodriguez's expertise would continue to be needed as criminal organizations developed even more sophisticated surveillance and intelligence capabilities. Her experience had made her one of the few law enforcement professionals capable of recognizing and investigating advanced criminal surveillance operations. But the evolution of the threats also meant that her personal security situation would never normalize. The criminal organizations she had helped investigate would continue to see her as a threat requiring elimination, while new criminal networks would identify her as an obstacle to their own operations. 5 years after her initial encounter with David Morse, Rodriguez found herself working under deep cover as part of what federal agencies called the Shadow Protocol, a classified program designed to infiltrate and disrupt criminal intelligence networks by using their own surveillance techniques against them. The Shadow Protocol represented a fundamental shift in law enforcement strategy, acknowledging that traditional police methods were inadequate for investigating criminal organizations that possessed military-grade surveillance and intelligence capabilities. Rodriguez's expertise in recognizing systematic surveillance patterns made her uniquely qualified for the dangerous work of operating undercover within criminal intelligence networks. "You're going to become what you've been fighting," FBI Director Sarah Chen explained during Rodriguez's final briefing before deploying under deep cover. "The only way to effectively investigate these networks is to become part of them, to understand their operations from the inside, and to develop capabilities that can match their sophisticated surveillance technologies." The deep cover assignment required Rodriguez to assume a completely fabricated identity and integrate herself into the criminal intelligence community that operated in the shadows of legitimate security and investigation industries. Her cover identity as a freelance surveillance specialist allowed her to make contact with criminal organizations seeking to recruit individuals with her apparent expertise. Operating under the name Maria Santos, Rodriguez spent months establishing credibility within the criminal surveillance community, gradually building relationships with individuals and organizations involved in systematic intelligence gathering operations. The work required her to participate in activities that bordered on illegal, while gathering evidence about criminal networks that could eventually be used for prosecution. "The hardest part," Rodriguez reported during a coded communication with her federal handlers, "is maintaining the balance between gathering intelligence and avoiding participation in actual crimes. These organizations test new recruits by involving them in increasingly serious activities to ensure loyalty and commitment. The deep cover operation revealed the true scope of criminal intelligence networks that had developed since Rodriguez's original investigation. The organizations had evolved into sophisticated enterprises that provided intelligence services to various types of criminal operations, foreign intelligence agencies, and even legitimate businesses seeking competitive intelligence about rivals. Rodriguez's infiltration of the networks exposed operational methods that exceeded anything law enforcement agencies had previously encountered. The criminal organizations possessed artificial intelligence systems that could analyze vast amounts of surveillance data, quantum encryption technologies that protected their communications from government interception, and international infrastructure that allowed them to operate across multiple countries simultaneously. They're essentially running a parallel intelligence service, Rodriguez reported during one of her rare secure communications with federal agencies. They have capabilities that rival those of government intelligence agencies, but they're selling their services to anyone willing to pay rather than serving national interests. The undercover investigation also revealed that criminal intelligence networks had infiltrated government agencies, law enforcement departments, and military organizations to gather intelligence about official operations and identify personnel who posed threats to their activities. Rodriguez discovered that her own original investigation had been monitored by criminal organizations that had sources within federal agencies, allowing them to track law enforcement activities and adapt their operations to avoid detection and disruption. The level of penetration is extraordinary, Rodriguez reported. They have real-time intelligence about law enforcement operations, government policy discussions, and even classified national security activities. They're operating with better intelligence about government activities than many government agencies have about each other. The deep cover operation required Rodriguez to live under constant stress and danger, maintaining her fabricated identity while gathering intelligence about criminal organizations that would kill her if they discovered her true role. The psychological pressure of the assignment was intensified by the knowledge that she was isolated from normal support systems and dependent on criminal contacts for her safety and survival. I'm living in a world where everyone around me is a potential threat, Rodriguez communicated during one of her psychological evaluation sessions. My survival depends on convincing dangerous people that I'm someone I'm not, while gathering information that could eventually be used to destroy their operations. The undercover work also revealed personal information about Rodriguez that criminal organizations had gathered during their surveillance of her activities over the years. Her fabricated identity had to account for the comprehensive intelligence that criminal networks possessed about her real background and history. They know more about my actual life than my cover identity, Rodriguez realized during the operation. I have to constantly adapt my story to account for the fact that they have detailed files about my real activities and relationships. The Shadow Protocol operation eventually gathered sufficient intelligence to conduct coordinated strikes against multiple criminal intelligence networks simultaneously. But the success also exposed Rodriguez to retaliation from organizations that realized they had been infiltrated and compromised. Rodriguez's extraction from the undercover operation required elaborate security measures to protect her from criminal organizations seeking revenge for her role in disrupting their activities. The end of the assignment marked the beginning of a new phase of her career, working in classified programs that remained hidden from public knowledge. Your undercover work has provided crucial intelligence about criminal surveillance networks, Director Chen told Rodriguez during her post-operation debrief. But it's also made you a permanent target for retaliation from organizations that now know you were responsible for major disruptions to their operations. The Shadow Protocol had succeeded in gathering intelligence and disrupting criminal networks. but it had also revealed the extent to which criminal organizations had penetrated government agencies and law enforcement departments. The ongoing security threats meant that Rodriguez's involvement in classified operations would continue indefinitely. 7 years after her first encounter with David Morse on a routine patrol in Manhattan's Lower East Side, Rodriguez found herself working in a classified facility beneath the Federal Building in Lower Manhattan, coordinating what had become a permanent conflict between law enforcement agencies and criminal intelligence networks that operated with increasing sophistication and international scope. The facility, known only as the Urban Security Operations Center, represented the evolution of traditional policing into something that resembled intelligence warfare more than conventional law enforcement. Rodriguez's expertise in recognizing and investigating systematic surveillance operations had made her a crucial figure in protecting American cities from criminal organizations that possessed capabilities formerly associated only with hostile foreign governments. "We're fighting a war that most people don't know exists," Rodriguez explained to a new analyst joining the center's operations. "Criminal organizations are conducting intelligence operations against American citizens, government officials and law enforcement personnel using technologies and methods that exceed what most people think is possible." Rodriguez's daily work involved analyzing intelligence reports from sources around the world, coordinating with international law enforcement agencies, and developing countermeasures against criminal surveillance networks that operated across multiple countries and jurisdictions. The criminal organizations had continued to evolve their capabilities, developing artificial intelligence systems that could conduct comprehensive surveillance and intelligence analysis automatically, quantum communication networks that were immune to government interception, and even space-based surveillance capabilities that allowed them to monitor targets anywhere on Earth. The gap between criminal capabilities and law enforcement resources continues to widen, Rodriguez observed during a briefing for senior government officials. They have access to technologies and resources that allow them to operate with impunity in most situations, while law enforcement agencies struggle to develop effective countermeasures. The Urban Security Operations Center represented an attempt to create law enforcement capabilities that could match the sophistication of criminal intelligence networks, but the effort required resources and technologies that pushed the boundaries of what democratic societies considered acceptable for police activities. Rodriguez worked with NSA technical specialists, CIA operations officers, and military intelligence analysts to develop methods for protecting American cities from criminal organizations that possessed capabilities formerly associated only with foreign intelligence services. "We're using intelligence community methods to investigate criminal organizations," Rodriguez explained to congressional oversight committees during classified briefings. "The traditional boundaries between law enforcement and intelligence operations have disappeared, because the threats we're facing exceed what traditional policing methods can address." The personal cost of Rodriguez's career had included permanent separation from normal civilian life and relationships. The security measures necessary to protect her from sophisticated criminal surveillance required her to live under constant protection and monitoring that isolated her from ordinary social interactions. "I've become a professional target," Rodriguez told the government psychologist during one of their regular sessions. "My expertise is valuable to law enforcement and national security agencies, but it's also made me a permanent threat to criminal organizations that see me as an obstacle to their operations." The ongoing nature of the conflict meant that Rodriguez's work would continue indefinitely as criminal organizations developed new capabilities, and law enforcement agencies struggled to maintain pace with evolving threats. Her original observation of suspicious behavior during a routine patrol had led to the discovery of criminal intelligence networks that threatened the security of American cities and the safety of wealthy citizens who became targets for systematic surveillance and criminal exploitation. Everything started with trusting my instincts about something that looked legal but felt wrong. Rodriguez reflected during a training session for new officers. The lesson is that modern criminal organizations are sophisticated enough to operate within legal boundaries while conducting activities that threaten public safety and national security. The Urban Security Operations Center had become Rodriguez's permanent assignment, coordinating intelligence and operations against criminal surveillance networks that continued to evolve and adapt to law enforcement countermeasures. But the work also required her to maintain awareness that the methods necessary to fight sophisticated criminal organizations could themselves pose threats to the privacy and civil liberties that democratic societies were designed to protect. We are walking a narrow line between protecting people from criminal surveillance and creating government surveillance capabilities that could threaten the freedoms we're trying to protect, Rodriguez observed during policy discussions about the future of urban security operations. The balance between security and freedom remained an ongoing challenge, as criminal organizations continued to develop capabilities that required corresponding evolution in law enforcement methods and technologies. Rodriguez's career had taken her from street patrol to the highest levels of national security operations, but the fundamental mission remained the same: protecting people from those who would use systematic surveillance and intelligence gathering to exploit and harm others. 10 years after Officer Sarah Rodriguez first noticed David Morse examining buildings with suspicious attention to security details, she sat in her secure office overlooking the East River, reviewing intelligence reports that revealed how far the conflict between law enforcement and criminal surveillance networks had evolved. The criminal organizations that had emerged from her original investigation had become a permanent feature of urban security threats, requiring ongoing vigilance and sophisticated countermeasures that had transformed the nature of policing in American cities. Rodriguez's expertise had made her one of the most valuable assets in the ongoing effort to protect civilians from systematic criminal surveillance, but it had also made her a permanent target for organizations that saw her as a threat to their operations. "The work continues," Rodriguez wrote in her final report as she prepared for another deep cover assignment that would take her into the international criminal intelligence community. "The threats evolve, the technologies advance, but the fundamental mission remains the same: protecting people from those who would use surveillance and intelligence gathering to exploit their vulnerabilities." Her personal life had been completely absorbed into her professional mission, with security requirements that made normal relationships and activities impossible. The price of expertise in recognizing and fighting criminal surveillance had been the loss of privacy and normalcy in her own life. But Rodriguez understood that the work was necessary to protect others from the systematic exploitation that criminal intelligence networks represented. Her original instincts about suspicious behavior had led to the discovery of threats that most people never realized existed. "Someone has to watch the watchers," Rodriguez concluded in her final personal journal entry before beginning her new assignment. Criminal organizations are using systematic surveillance to identify and exploit vulnerable people throughout our society. If law enforcement doesn't develop capabilities to recognize and counter these threats, innocent people will continue to be victimized by sophisticated criminal operations. The Urban Security Operations Center would continue its mission with new personnel trained in the methods Rodriguez had developed, but the ongoing nature of the threat meant that the conflict between criminal surveillance networks and law enforcement would continue indefinitely. Rodriguez's legacy was the understanding that modern criminal organizations possessed capabilities that exceeded traditional law enforcement methods, requiring new approaches that integrated intelligence community techniques with conventional policing to protect American cities from systematic criminal exploitation. Her final assignment would take her back into the shadows of the criminal intelligence community, where she would continue the dangerous work of understanding and disrupting organizations that threatened the safety and security of innocent civilians through systematic surveillance and criminal exploitation. The watch continued, one observation at a time, one investigation at a time, one dangerous undercover assignment at a time, protecting people from threats they never knew existed in the spaces between legal activity and criminal exploitation. As Rodriguez disappeared into her new identity for another deep cover operation, the city continued its nightly rhythm, unaware that sophisticated criminal organizations were conducting systematic surveillance of its most vulnerable residents, and equally unaware that dedicated law enforcement professionals were working in the shadows to protect them from exploitation. The eternal watch persisted, fought by people like Rodriguez who had learned to recognize the subtle signs that revealed criminal intent hidden behind legitimate appearances, preserving the safety and security of urban communities against threats that operated in the spaces where traditional policing could not reach. In her final message to her colleagues at the Urban Security Operations Center, Rodriguez wrote, "Trust your instincts when something looks legal but feels wrong. The most dangerous threats often hide behind legitimate appearances, and only careful observation and persistent investigation can reveal their true nature." The message became the unofficial motto of the center's operations, reminding officers that the most sophisticated criminal organizations were those that learned to operate within legal boundaries while pursuing criminal objectives, requiring law enforcement to develop equally sophisticated methods for recognizing and investigating threats that traditional policing methods could not address. Rodriguez's story had begun with a routine patrol and suspicious observation, but it had evolved into a career devoted to protecting society from criminal organizations that possessed capabilities formerly associated only with government intelligence agencies. The ongoing nature of the threat meant that her work would continue indefinitely, fought in the shadows of legitimate society, where criminal surveillance networks operated beyond the reach of conventional law enforcement. Officer Daniel Torres had been working the night shift in Brooklyn's 78th Precinct for 4 years when he first encountered what would become the most disturbing case of his law enforcement career. It began not with a dramatic crime scene or urgent emergency call, but with a pattern of seemingly routine complaints that shared one unsettling characteristic. The victims couldn't remember crucial details about what had happened to them. The first case crossed Torres's desk on a cold February night in 2020. Margaret Klein, a 67-year-old retired librarian living alone in Park Slope, had called 911 to report that someone had been in her apartment while she was sleeping. When Torres responded to take her statement, Klein's account was frustratingly vague. "I know someone was here," Klein insisted, wrapping her bathrobe tighter around herself as she stood in her tidy living room. "Things have been moved. My personal papers have been disturbed, but I can't remember hearing anything or seeing anyone. It's like I was in some kind of deep sleep." Torres conducted a thorough search of Klein's apartment, checking windows, doors, and potential entry points. Everything appeared secure, with no signs of forced entry. Klein's jewelry, electronics, and cash remained untouched. The only evidence supporting her claim was the subtle disorganization she pointed out. Papers arranged differently than she remembered. Books moved on shelves, personal items relocated in ways that suggested someone had carefully searched through her belongings. "Mrs. Klein, is it possible you moved these things yourself and forgot? Sometimes when we're tired or stressed, we can misremember how we left things." Klein's response was firm, despite her obvious confusion. "Officer, I've lived in this apartment for 23 years. I know where I keep everything. Someone was here, but it's like I was drugged or something. I usually wake up if a neighbor's dog barks, but last night I slept like the dead." Torres documented the incident as a possible burglary with no property taken, but Klein's description of unnaturally deep sleep troubled him. Over his 4 years of police work, he'd responded to numerous break-ins, and victims typically reported being awakened by sounds or discovering the intrusion immediately upon returning home. The combination of clear evidence of searching with no theft and the victim's memory gaps was unusual. 3 nights later, Torres received a similar call from the same neighborhood. Robert Chen, a 45-year-old accountant living 6 blocks from Klein's apartment, reported that his home office had been searched while he slept in the adjacent bedroom. My filing cabinets were gone through, my computer was moved, even my desk drawers were opened and searched, Chen explained, showing Torres his home office. But nothing was stolen. My laptop, cash, credit cards, everything valuable is still here. Like Klein, Chen reported sleeping unusually deeply and having no memory of sounds or disturbances during the night. Also, like Klein, he was absolutely certain that someone had systematically searched through his personal belongings and documents. "Did you take any sleeping medication or drink alcohol before bed?" Torres asked, following up on the similarity between the cases. "I don't drink, and I never take sleeping pills. I'm usually a light sleeper. My wife always complains that I wake up when she gets up to use the bathroom. But last night I was unconscious until my alarm went off." Torres began to recognize a pattern that extended beyond coincidence. 2 victims in the same neighborhood reporting identical circumstances. Systematic searching of their homes with no theft, combined with unusually deep sleep and memory gaps about the intrusion. The 3rd case, 1 week later, confirmed Torres's growing suspicion that these weren't random break-ins. Patricia Williams, a 52-year-old social worker living in a brownstone just 4 blocks from the previous incidents, called police to report that someone had photographed documents in her home office while she slept. "They didn't take anything, but they moved my papers around and I found some documents left in different order than I keep them," Williams told Torres. "It's like someone was copying or photographing my personal files." Williams also reported the same unnaturally deep sleep that had characterized the previous cases. More significantly, she had noticed a faint chemical smell in her apartment when she woke up. Something she described as medical or hospital-like that had dissipated by the time Torres arrived. "Mrs. Williams, do you have any idea why someone would be interested in your personal documents specifically? Do you work with sensitive information or have access to anything that might be valuable to criminals?" Williams considered the question carefully. "I work with confidential client files and social services, but those are kept at the office, not at home. The documents in my home office are just personal records, tax returns, insurance papers, medical information, nothing that should interest criminals." Torres was beginning to understand that these weren't ordinary burglaries. Someone was systematically targeting residents in a specific area of Park Slope, using some method to ensure victims remained unconscious while their homes were searched and their personal information was accessed or copied. The implications were disturbing. If someone could incapacitate people in their own homes without their knowledge and access their most private documents, the potential for identity theft, financial fraud, or other sophisticated crimes was enormous. Torres decided to contact Detective Sergeant Maria Santos, who supervised investigations of property crimes in the 78th Precinct. His growing file of similar incidents required detective-level investigation and coordination with specialized units that could analyze the technical aspects of what appeared to be chemically assisted burglaries. "Sergeant, I've got 3 cases in Park Slope that appear to be connected. Someone's breaking into homes and searching through personal documents while using some method to keep the victims unconscious. No property stolen, but clear evidence of systematic document access. Santos reviewed Torres's incident reports with growing concern. This sounds like intelligence gathering rather than traditional burglary. Someone's collecting personal information from multiple victims, possibly for identity theft or financial fraud operations. The investigation was about to expand as Torres and Santos discovered that the 3 reported cases were just the beginning of a much larger operation that had been systematically targeting Brooklyn residents for months without detection. Detective Sergeant Maria Santos assigned Detective Lisa Chang to work with Torres on what they had begun calling the memory gap cases. Chang brought expertise in financial crimes and identity theft to complement Torres's street-level knowledge of the neighborhood and victims involved. Chang's first step was to interview the 3 known victims more extensively, focusing on their personal information, financial accounts, and any subsequent suspicious activity that might indicate how their personal data was being exploited. The pattern suggests highly sophisticated identity thieves, Chang explained to Torres as they prepared for follow-up interviews. Traditional burglars take physical property they can quickly convert to cash. These intruders are taking time to photograph or copy documents, which means they're planning longer-term exploitation of the information they're gathering. The expanded interviews revealed disturbing details that hadn't emerged during the initial police reports. Margaret Klein discovered that someone had accessed her online banking account 3 days after the break-in, though no money had been transferred. The login had occurred from a location in Manhattan at 3 a.m., when Klein was asleep in her Brooklyn apartment. Robert Chen found that his credit report had been accessed by an unknown party claiming to be conducting a pre-employment background check for a company that didn't exist. The credit inquiry occurred 2 days after his home office was searched. Patricia Williams received a call from her bank's fraud prevention department asking about suspicious activity on her account. Someone had attempted to change her mailing address and request replacement credit cards, but the bank's security measures had blocked the requests pending verification. They're not just copying information, Chang realized. They're immediately using it to access accounts, establish new credit, and potentially assume the victims' identities for various types of fraud. The investigation expanded to include the NYPD's Financial Crimes Task Force and coordination with federal agencies that specialized in identity theft operations. The systematic nature of the intrusions and the sophisticated use of the stolen information suggested an organized operation that likely extended beyond the 3 known victims. Chang and Torres conducted a canvass of the Park Slope neighborhood, looking for additional victims who might not have realized they had been targeted. Many residents reported sleeping unusually deeply on specific nights over the past several months, but most had attributed the experience to stress, fatigue, or natural variation in sleep patterns. The scary thing, Torres observed during their investigation, is that most people wouldn't necessarily notice if someone carefully searched through their personal documents. Unless they're extremely organized or have photographic memory, subtle changes in how papers are arranged could go undetected. Chang's analysis of the financial exploitation revealed that the perpetrators had detailed knowledge of banking procedures, credit reporting systems, and identity verification processes. They knew exactly what information was needed to access accounts, apply for credit, and manipulate various types of financial records. This isn't amateur hour, Chang told Santos during a case briefing. Whoever's doing this has professional-level knowledge of financial systems and identity theft techniques. They're extracting specific information and using it efficiently to exploit victims' financial accounts. The investigation took a significant turn when Torres and Chang discovered that all 3 confirmed victims had used the same medical laboratory for recent blood work. Brooklyn Medical Labs, located in Park Slope, had processed routine blood tests for Klein, Chen, and Williams within 2 months of their respective break-ins. That can't be coincidence, Torres said as they reviewed the victim's medical records. Someone at the lab might have access to patient information and home addresses. Chang's investigation of Brooklyn medical labs revealed that the facility processed blood work for thousands of patients throughout Brooklyn and maintained extensive databases containing names, addresses, dates of birth, and medical information that would be valuable for identity theft operations. More disturbing was the discovery that the lab used contracted phlebotomists who made house calls for elderly or mobility-limited patients. The service required technicians to visit patients' homes, providing opportunities to observe security measures, daily routines, and the presence of valuable information. Home visit medical services would be perfect cover for casing potential targets, Chang realized. The technicians have legitimate reasons to be in people's homes, access to personal information, and opportunities to observe how to gain access later. Torres and Chang requested employment records for Brooklyn Medical Lab's contracted personnel, looking for individuals with criminal histories or connections to identity theft operations. The investigation revealed that 2 recent employees had been hired despite incomplete background checks, and had subsequently left their positions around the time the break-ins began. One of the former employees, Thomas Morrison, had been terminated for accessing patient records beyond what was necessary for his job duties. Morrison's employment history included previous positions at medical facilities in other states, and preliminary background checks revealed possible connections to financial crimes investigations in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Morrison fits the profile, Chang told Torres as they reviewed his employment file. Medical training would explain knowledge of sedatives or drugs that could cause memory gaps. Previous positions at medical facilities would provide access to personal information and opportunities to develop identity theft techniques. The investigation team decided to conduct a surveillance of Morrison while seeking warrants to search his residence and examine his financial records. Morrison's current address was listed as a studio apartment in Crown Heights, but neighbors reported that he was rarely seen and kept irregular hours. If Morrison is using medical knowledge to drug victims and conducting break-ins during night hours, his irregular schedule would make sense, Torres observed. He'd need to sleep during the day and work at night to avoid detection. Chang's investigation of Morrison's financial records revealed suspicious patterns that supported their theory about his involvement in the identity theft operation. Morrison had numerous bank accounts, credit cards issued under slightly different name variations, and financial activity that suggested income from sources beyond his medical technician salary. He's definitely engaged in identity theft, Chang concluded. Multiple accounts, varied name spellings, income sources that don't match legitimate employment. The question is whether he's working alone or part of a larger operation. The answer came when Torres and Chang discovered that Morrison had been in contact with several other individuals who had similar employment histories at medical facilities and suspicious financial patterns. The investigation revealed a network of at least 6 people using medical access to target identity theft victims across Brooklyn and potentially other boroughs. The investigation into Thomas Morrison and his network led Torres and Chang to collaborate with the NYPD's Narcotics Division to understand the chemical methods being used to incapacitate victims during the break-ins. The consistently reported memory gaps and unusually deep sleep suggested the use of sophisticated drugs that left minimal traces and didn't trigger obvious symptoms. Detective Kevin Walsh from Narcotics brought expertise in chemical substances used for criminal purposes, including date rape drugs, anesthetics, and other compounds that could render victims unconscious or compliant. Based on the victim descriptions, deep sleep, memory gaps, no recollection of intrusion, but waking up naturally at normal times, we're probably looking at benzodiazepines or similar sedatives that can be administered without the victim's knowledge, Walsh explained during a briefing on the chemical aspects of the case. The challenge was understanding how the drugs were being administered to victims in their own homes without their awareness. Traditional methods like drinks or food wouldn't explain how victims were affected while sleeping in secured apartments. The medical training component is crucial, Walsh continued. Morrison and his associates would know how to calculate dosages, understand drug interactions, and potentially use delivery methods that wouldn't be obvious to victims or investigating officers. Chang's research into Morrison's background revealed that he had advanced training in phlebotomy and medical laboratory procedures, including knowledge of anesthetics and sedatives used in medical settings. His access to medical supplies and drugs through his employment at various facilities could explain how he obtained the substances used to incapacitate victims. He also has lock-picking skills, Torres added, reviewing Morrison's criminal history. 2 arrests in Pennsylvania for burglary, though charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence. The combination of medical knowledge and breaking and entering skills makes him a perfect candidate for these types of operations. The investigation team decided to conduct a controlled surveillance operation designed to catch Morrison in the act of targeting a victim. Working with patrol officers in Park Slope, they identified potential targets based on the demographic patterns of previous victims. Middle-aged to elderly residents living alone in ground-floor or easily accessible apartments. The surveillance operation required coordination between multiple units to maintain continuous observation while remaining undetected. Morrison's irregular schedule and cautious behavior suggested he was aware of potential police attention and taking measures to avoid detection. He's definitely surveillance conscious, Torres observed during the 3rd night of watching Morrison's movements. He varies his routes, uses public transportation to obscure his destinations, and spends time conducting counter-surveillance to identify potential police presence. The breakthrough came when surveillance teams observed Morrison meeting with 2 other individuals in Prospect Park at 2 a.m. on a Thursday night. The meeting lasted approximately 20 minutes, and involved the exchange of what appeared to be documents, medical supplies, and small containers that could contain drugs or chemicals. This confirms he's part of a larger network, Chang realized. They're coordinating targets, sharing information, and distributing materials needed for the operations. Torres and Chang followed one of Morrison's associates to a storage facility in Red Hook, where surveillance revealed multiple individuals accessing units that appeared to contain equipment and supplies consistent with identity theft operations. Computers, document scanning equipment, and what looked like medical supplies. They've got a sophisticated operation, Walsh observed during the surveillance debrief. Medical knowledge for drug administration, lock-picking skills for entry, scanning equipment for document copying, and coordination between multiple operatives for efficiency and security. The investigation team obtained warrants to search the storage facility and Morrison's apartment simultaneously, hoping to gather evidence of the drug administration methods and document the full scope of the identity theft network. The search of Morrison's apartment revealed a disturbing collection of materials that confirmed their theories about his methods. Medical supplies, including syringes, various sedatives, and lock-picking tools were found alongside detailed notes about potential targets, including photographs and personal information about dozens of Brooklyn residents. He's been conducting surveillance of potential victims for months, Chang discovered while reviewing Morrison's notes. Names, addresses, work schedules, security measures, medical information. He's building comprehensive profiles before targeting anyone. The most disturbing discovery was Morrison's method for drug administration. Rather than using traditional injection or ingestion methods, he had developed a technique using aerosol delivery of sedatives through apartment ventilation systems or under doors, allowing him to incapacitate victims without direct contact. He's using medical nebulizers to create drug aerosols that can be introduced into apartments through small openings, Walsh explained. The victims breathe the sedatives naturally while sleeping, creating the deep unconsciousness and memory gaps without obvious injection sites or other evidence. The search of the storage facility revealed the full scope of the identity theft network. 6 individuals were involved in systematic operations across Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan, targeting hundreds of potential victims identified through their various positions in medical, service, and delivery industries. Computer equipment at the facility contained databases with personal information about over 2,000 individuals, including detailed profiles, financial information, and operational plans for exploiting their identities for various types of fraud. "This is massive," Chang told Santos during the post-search briefing. "They've been operating for at least 2 years, targeting hundreds of people, and stealing millions of dollars through identity theft, credit fraud, and financial account manipulation." The coordinated arrests of Morrison and his 5 associates yielded evidence of one of the largest identity theft operations ever discovered in New York City. But the investigation also revealed that the network had connections to similar operations in other states, suggesting a national or international criminal enterprise using medical access to conduct systematic identity theft. Torres's initial recognition of the pattern in seemingly routine burglary reports had led to the exposure of a sophisticated criminal operation that might have continued undetected for years, victimizing thousands of people throughout the region. The arrests of Morrison and his immediate network revealed only the operational level of what federal investigators determined was a much larger criminal enterprise specializing in systematic identity theft through medical access. FBI Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, brought in to coordinate the federal investigation, briefed Torres and Chang on the national scope of what they had uncovered. "Your investigation has exposed one cell of a network that operates in at least 12 states," Agent Walsh explained during a joint task force meeting. "They're using medical access, service industry positions, and delivery services to identify and target victims for comprehensive identity theft operations." The federal investigation revealed that the network used sophisticated data analysis to identify optimal targets based on financial profiles, security vulnerabilities, and personal information gathered through various legitimate business interactions. Morrison's Brooklyn operation was one of dozens of similar cells operating throughout the United States. "They're essentially running a criminal intelligence service specializing in identity theft," Agent Walsh continued. "Medical records, service appointments, delivery schedules, any business interaction that provides access to personal information is being exploited to identify potential victims." Chang's analysis of the computer equipment seized from the storage facility revealed artificial intelligence systems that could process vast amounts of personal data to identify high-value targets and predict optimal timing for identity theft operations. The AI can analyze someone's financial records, spending patterns, work schedule, and personal habits to determine when they're most vulnerable to identity theft and least likely to detect the exploitation quickly, Chang explained to the task force. The sophistication of the operation exceeded anything local law enforcement had previously encountered. The network used encrypted communications, international banking connections, and sophisticated money laundering techniques to protect their operations and profits from law enforcement detection. Torres's role in the expanded investigation focused on identifying additional victims and understanding the full scope of the Brooklyn operations. Interviews with hundreds of potential targets revealed that many people had experienced the characteristic deep sleep and memory gaps, but hadn't connected the experiences to criminal activity. The scary thing is how many people experience the intrusions without realizing they were victimized, Torres told Agent Walsh during victim interviews. Most attributed the deep sleep to natural causes and didn't notice the subtle changes in their personal documents. The investigation also revealed that the network had been selling victim information to other criminal organizations specializing in different types of exploitation. Personal data gathered through the medical access operations was valuable for various criminal purposes beyond traditional identity theft. Tax fraud, insurance fraud, employment fraud, government benefits fraud. Comprehensive personal information can be used for dozens of different criminal schemes, Agent Walsh explained. They weren't just stealing identities, they were creating a marketplace for criminal exploitation of personal information. Chang's work with federal cybercrime specialists revealed that the network had developed sophisticated techniques for exploiting victim information through various online platforms and financial systems. They could open accounts, apply for credit, file fraudulent tax returns, and conduct numerous financial crimes using stolen identities. The integration of medical access with cybercrime techniques is unprecedented, Agent Walsh observed. They're combining old-fashioned breaking and entering with cutting-edge identity theft and financial fraud methods. The federal investigation expanded to include international cooperation, as evidence emerged that the network had connections to organized crime groups in Eastern Europe and Asia that specialized in cybercrime and financial fraud. This isn't just American criminals, Agent Walsh told the task force. They're working with international networks that provide technical expertise, money laundering services, and markets for stolen information. Torres and Chang's investigation had evolved from routine burglary reports to a complex international criminal enterprise that threatened the financial security of thousands of victims across multiple countries. The personal impact on Torres was significant, as he realized that his attention to patterns in seemingly minor crimes had led to the exposure of threats that most people didn't know existed. I started with 3 elderly people who thought someone had been in their apartments, Torres reflected during the investigation. Now, we're looking at thousands of victims and millions of dollars in fraud losses. The federal investigation would continue for months, as authorities worked to identify all victims, trace financial losses, and coordinate with international partners to disrupt the network's global operations. But Torres's experience had taught him that modern criminals could exploit any access to personal information for sophisticated fraud operations, requiring law enforcement to recognize patterns and connections that might not be obvious during initial investigations. As the federal investigation expanded over the following months, Torres found himself working as a consultant to help identify the scope of victims and understand the operational methods used by the identity theft network. His expertise in recognizing the subtle signs of chemically assisted intrusions became valuable for investigating similar operations in other jurisdictions. The full scope of the network revealed a criminal enterprise that had been operating for over 4 years, systematically exploiting medical and service industry access to conduct comprehensive identity theft operations across multiple states and international boundaries. They were running what amounts to a memory harvesting operation, Agent Walsh explained during a briefing on the investigation's findings. Using chemical sedation to access victims' homes and personal information while ensuring the victims wouldn't remember the intrusions or be able to provide useful evidence to law enforcement. Torres worked with victims' advocacy groups to help people understand how to protect themselves from similar operations and recognize signs that their personal information might have been compromised. The education program focused on the importance of monitoring financial accounts, credit reports, and personal documents for signs of unauthorized access. The challenge is that this type of identity theft can go undetected for months or years, Torres explained during community education sessions. Victims don't know they've been targeted, and the criminals used the information gradually to avoid triggering obvious fraud alerts. The investigation also revealed vulnerabilities in medical privacy and security that extended far beyond the specific criminal network Torres had helped expose. Medical facilities, home health services, and healthcare-related businesses had access to comprehensive personal information that could be exploited for various criminal purposes. Torres's work with federal agencies led to new protocols for background checks and security measures in medical and service industries that had access to personal information in homes. But the implementation of enhanced security measures was complicated by the legitimate business needs of healthcare providers and service companies. We need to balance security against the practical requirements of medical care and home services, Torres observed during policy discussions with healthcare administrators. People need access to medical care and home services, but they also need protection from criminals who might exploit those business relationships. The psychological impact of the investigation affected Torres's approach to police work and his understanding of how sophisticated criminals could exploit normal business interactions for criminal purposes. The most disturbing aspect, Torres told the police psychologist during counseling sessions, is realizing how vulnerable people are to systematic exploitation through normal activities like medical care, delivery services, and home maintenance. Any business interaction that involves personal information creates potential criminal opportunities. The federal investigation eventually resulted in over 40 arrests across 12 states and the recovery of millions of dollars in fraudulent transactions. But the investigation also revealed that similar networks continued to operate using evolved techniques that were even more difficult to detect. Torres's expertise in recognizing chemically assisted intrusions led to his assignment to a specialized unit focusing on sophisticated identity theft and financial fraud operations. His experience became the foundation for training programs designed to help law enforcement agencies recognize similar threats. The lesson is that criminals will exploit any access to personal information for sophisticated fraud operations, Torres explained during training sessions for other officers. Medical access, service industry positions, delivery services, any legitimate business interaction can be weaponized for criminal purposes by people with the right knowledge and criminal intent. The ongoing nature of the threat meant that Torres's expertise would continue to be valuable as criminal organizations developed new methods for accessing personal information and exploiting it for various types of fraud. But the personal cost of the investigation included permanent awareness that any business interaction involving personal information could potentially be exploited by sophisticated criminals seeking to gather intelligence for identity theft operations. 2 years after his initial investigation, Torres was contacted by federal agents investigating what appeared to be an evolution of the medical access identity theft network he had helped expose. The new operations had adapted to law enforcement countermeasures by developing even more sophisticated methods for accessing personal information and exploiting it for criminal purposes. "They've gone digital," Agent Walsh explained during a briefing on the new threats. Instead of physically breaking into homes to access documents, they're using cyber techniques to access the same information remotely while still using chemical sedation to prevent victims from detecting the intrusions. The evolved network had developed capabilities for remotely accessing home computer systems, Wi-Fi networks, and smart home devices, while victims were chemically sedated, allowing them to gather comprehensive personal information without leaving physical evidence of intrusion. Torres's expertise in recognizing the signs of chemical sedation became crucial for identifying victims of the new cyber-assisted operations, which still relied on his original observation about memory gaps and unusually deep sleep. "The chemical component remains constant," Torres observed during the investigation. "Victims still report the same deep sleep and memory loss, But now the criminals are accessing digital information rather than physical documents. The investigation revealed that the network had developed artificial intelligence systems that could automatically identify and extract valuable personal information from compromised home computer systems, creating an industrial-scale identity theft operation that could process hundreds of victims simultaneously. Torres worked with cybercrime specialists to understand how the digital access integrated with the chemical sedation to create a comprehensive exploitation method that was extremely difficult for victims to detect or for law enforcement to investigate. They're combining the worst aspects of cybercrime with the worst aspects of breaking and entering, Torres told federal investigators. Victims are unconscious during the intrusion, so they can't provide evidence about the break-in, and the criminals are accessing digital information that doesn't leave obvious physical evidence. The scope of the new network exceeded the original medical access operation by orders of magnitude. Computer analysis revealed that they had accessed personal information from over 10,000 victims across 23 states, creating one of the largest identity theft operations in American law enforcement history. Torres's role in the investigation expanded to include training federal agents and international law enforcement partners on recognizing the signs of chemically assisted cyber intrusions, a new category of crime that combined elements of traditional breaking and entering with sophisticated cybercrime techniques. This represents a new evolution in organized crime, Torres explained during an international law enforcement conference. Criminals are combining physical access methods with cyber exploitation techniques to create comprehensive identity theft capabilities that exceed what either approach could achieve independently. The investigation also revealed that the network was selling victim information in underground digital marketplaces that connected various types of criminal organizations seeking personal data for different types of exploitation. There's an entire economy built around stolen personal information, Agent Walsh told Torres during the investigation. Medical records for insurance fraud, financial information for tax fraud, personal details for social engineering. Comprehensive victim profiles can be sold to multiple criminal organizations for different purposes. Torres's understanding of how the network operated became valuable for federal efforts to disrupt the underground economy that had developed around systematic identity theft and personal information exploitation. But the investigation also revealed that Torres's own personal information had been compromised by the network, which had identified him as a threat to their operations and had conducted surveillance of his activities and personal relationships. Enhanced security measures became necessary to protect Torres from potential retaliation, but the measures also reinforced his understanding of how vulnerable people were to systematic exploitation by criminal organizations with sophisticated capabilities. The most frightening aspect, Torres told federal investigators, is realizing that any aspect of modern life involving digital devices or personal information can be exploited by criminal organizations with the right technical capabilities and criminal intent. 3 years into his involvement with federal investigations of identity theft networks, Torres found himself struggling with the psychological impact of constant awareness about personal information vulnerabilities and the sophisticated methods criminal organizations use to exploit ordinary people. Working with Dr. Sarah Kim, a psychologist specializing in law enforcement trauma, Torres addressed how his expertise in recognizing identity theft operations had affected his ability to maintain normal personal relationships and daily activities. Every business interaction, every medical appointment, every service call to my apartment, I'm constantly analyzing whether someone might be gathering intelligence for criminal purposes, Torres explained during counseling sessions. It's exhausting to treat every normal interaction as a potential security threat. Dr. Kim helped Torres understand that his hypervigilance was a natural response to the comprehensive threats he had learned to recognize, but that it could become counterproductive if it prevented him from maintaining normal personal relationships and daily activities. Your expertise protects people from sophisticated criminal exploitation, Dr. Kim explained, but you need to develop methods for distinguishing between appropriate professional caution and excessive personal paranoia. Torres's work with federal agencies had also revealed that his family members and personal associates had been subjected to surveillance and intelligence gathering by criminal organizations that saw him as a threat to their operations. "They know everything about my personal life," Torres told Dr. Kim. "My family's daily routines, my friends' financial information, my girlfriend's work schedule. They've conducted the same type of comprehensive intelligence gathering on me that they use against their criminal targets." The security measures necessary to protect Torres from retaliation included changes to his personal routines, enhanced security for his residence, and coordination with federal agencies to monitor potential threats to his safety. But the security measures also isolated Torres from normal social interactions and created stress for family members and friends who were affected by the security protocols necessary to protect him. "The hardest part," Torres told Dr. Kim, "is that I can't have normal relationships when every person I interact with might potentially be gathering intelligence about me for criminal organizations that want to neutralize my threat to their operations." Torres's expertise had made him valuable to federal law enforcement agencies investigating identity theft networks, but it had also made him a permanent target for criminal retaliation and required lifestyle changes that affected every aspect of his personal life. The ongoing nature of the threats meant that Torres's security situation would never normalize, as new criminal organizations continued to identify him as an obstacle to their operations. "I've become a professional target," Torres observed. "My knowledge of identity theft networks makes me valuable to law enforcement, but it also makes me a threat to criminal organizations that will continue to see me as someone who needs to be neutralized." Despite the personal costs, Torres remained committed to his work, helping federal agencies identify and disrupt sophisticated identity theft operations that threatened the financial security of thousands of innocent people. "Someone has to understand how these operations work and help protect people from exploitation," Torres told Dr. Kim. "If law enforcement doesn't develop expertise in recognizing these threats, criminal organizations will continue to victimize vulnerable people using increasingly sophisticated methods." The counseling sessions helped Torres develop techniques for managing the psychological stress of his work while maintaining his effectiveness as an investigator specializing in identity theft operations. But the fundamental challenge remained. Torres's expertise in recognizing criminal exploitation of personal information had made him permanently aware of vulnerabilities that most people didn't know existed, creating constant stress about threats that were real but largely invisible to the general public. 4 years after his initial investigation, Torres was recruited by the Department of Homeland Security to help develop national security protocols for protecting critical infrastructure and government personnel from identity theft networks that had evolved to target not just individual civilians, but government officials, military personnel, and others with access to sensitive information. "The criminal organizations you helped expose have evolved beyond financial fraud," DHS coordinator Rebecca Martinez explained during Torres's briefing at the agency's headquarters. "They're now conducting systematic identity theft operations against government personnel to gain access to classified information and critical infrastructure systems. The national security implications of sophisticated identity theft networks targeting government personnel created new categories of threats that combined traditional criminal activities with espionage and national security concerns." Torres's expertise in recognizing the operational methods used by identity theft networks became valuable for protecting federal employees, military personnel, and others whose personal information could be exploited to gain unauthorized access to government systems and classified information. They're using the same basic methods: medical access, service industry infiltration, chemical sedation, but now they're targeting people whose identities can be used to access government facilities, computer systems, and classified information, Torres explained during training sessions for federal security personnel. The investigation revealed that identity theft networks had been contracted by foreign intelligence services seeking to gather information about American government operations, military capabilities, and critical infrastructure vulnerabilities. This isn't just organized crime anymore, Coordinator Martinez told Torres. These networks are conducting intelligence operations on behalf of hostile foreign governments that want to penetrate American security systems. Torres's role in the national security investigation required him to receive higher-level security clearances and undergo extensive background checks that reflected the sensitive nature of the threats being investigated. Working with intelligence community analysts, Torres helped develop profiles of how criminal identity theft networks could be used for espionage purposes, and what types of government personnel were most vulnerable to systematic exploitation. Anyone with security clearances, access to government facilities, or knowledge of critical infrastructure systems could be targeted, Torres observed during intelligence community briefings. The criminals aren't just stealing money anymore. They're stealing access to national security information. The investigation also revealed that Torres's own government work had made him a target for foreign intelligence services, seeking to neutralize his expertise in recognizing and disrupting identity theft operations that could be used for espionage purposes. Enhanced security measures included relocation to secure housing, continuous protective surveillance, and restricted communication protocols that isolated Torres from normal personal interactions while protecting him from potential threats. Your expertise threatens criminal networks that provide services to foreign intelligence operations, the security specialist explained to Torres. You represent a significant obstacle to espionage activities that depend on sophisticated identity theft capabilities. The personal cost of Torres's national security work included permanent separation from his previous life and relationships, as the security measures necessary to protect him required assuming a new identity and relocating to a protected environment. I started as a patrol officer responding to burglary reports, Torres reflected during a rare break from his classified responsibilities. Now, I'm working to protect national security from criminal organizations that conduct espionage operations using identity theft techniques. The evolution of Torres's career from local police work to national security operations reflected how sophisticated criminal organizations had developed capabilities that threatened not just individual victims, but the security of government institutions and critical infrastructure systems. But the ongoing nature of the threat meant that Torres's expertise would continue to be needed as criminal identity theft networks developed even more sophisticated methods for exploiting personal information for both criminal and espionage purposes. The war for information security continues, Torres wrote in his classified journal. Criminal organizations are developing capabilities that exceed what traditional law enforcement can address, requiring intelligence community resources and national security responses to protect both individua, citizens, and government institutions. 5 years after his initial investigation, Torres found himself working under deep cover as part of a classified program designed to infiltrate international criminal networks that specialized in identity theft for espionage purposes. His expertise in recognizing systematic identity theft operations made him uniquely qualified for the dangerous work of operating undercover within criminal organizations that provided services to foreign intelligence agencies. You're going to become part of the networks you've been fighting, DHS Director Sarah Chen explained during Torres's final briefing before his deep cover assignment. The only way to effectively investigate international identity theft operations that serve foreign intelligence purposes is to infiltrate them from within and understand how they recruit, train, and deploy operatives. The deep cover operation required Torres to assume a completely fabricated identity as Miguel Santos, a former medical technician with a criminal background who was seeking opportunities in sophisticated identity theft operations. His cover story was built around his actual expertise in recognizing chemical sedation techniques and medical access methods. Operating under his new identity, Torres spent months establishing credibility within the international criminal community that specialized in identity theft for espionage purposes. The work required him to participate in activities that bordered on actual criminal behavior, while gathering intelligence about networks that served foreign intelligence agencies. The most difficult aspect, Torres reported during coded communications with his federal handlers, is maintaining credibility within criminal organizations while avoiding participation in actual crimes against innocent victims. These networks test new recruits by involving them in increasingly serious operations to ensure loyalty and competence. The undercover operation revealed that international identity theft networks had evolved far beyond the domestic operations Torres had originally investigated. They now possessed capabilities for conducting comprehensive identity theft operations across multiple countries simultaneously, using sophisticated technology and international coordination. Torres's infiltration of the networks exposed operational methods that included artificial intelligence systems for analyzing potential targets, quantum encryption for protecting communications, and international money laundering networks for protecting criminal profits from law enforcement investigation. They're operating like a parallel intelligence service, Torres reported during secure communications with federal agencies. They have capabilities that rival government intelligence agencies, but they're selling their services to multiple foreign governments rather than serving any single national interest. The undercover investigation also revealed that international identity theft networks had developed comprehensive files on American law enforcement personnel, government officials, and military personnel who posed threats to their operations or those of their foreign intelligence clients. Torres discovered that his own original investigation had been monitored by international criminal organizations that maintain sources within American law enforcement agencies, allowing them to track investigations and adapt their operations to avoid detection. The penetration of American law enforcement is extensive, Torres reported. They have real-time intelligence about federal investigations, personnel assignments, and even classified operations that affect their activities. The deep cover operation required Torres to live under constant danger while maintaining his fabricated identity and gathering intelligence about criminal organizations that would eliminate him if they discovered his true role as a federal agent. The psychological pressure was intensified by the isolation from normal support systems and the knowledge that his survival depended on convincing sophisticated criminals that he was someone he wasn't. I'm living in a world where everyone around me represents a potential threat to my life, Torres communicated during psychological evaluation sessions. My survival depends on maintaining a criminal identity while gathering information that could eventually destroy the organizations I'm pretending to serve. The undercover work also revealed personal information about Torres that criminal organizations had gathered through systematic surveillance of his family, friends, and personal relationships over the years since his original investigation. They know more about my real background than my cover identity accounts for, Torres realized during the operation. I have to constantly adapt my story to account for comprehensive intelligence they possess about my actual life and career, The international scope of the identity theft networks created security challenges that extended far beyond American law enforcement capabilities. Criminal organizations could operate across multiple countries, using international boundaries to protect their activities from coordinated law enforcement responses. Torres's expertise in recognizing systematic identity theft patterns was valuable for understanding how international networks operated, but the scope and sophistication of their capabilities exceeded what domestic law enforcement agencies could effectively investigate or disrupt. These organizations have capabilities that threaten national security, Torres reported during the operation. They're conducting identity theft operations that could be used to penetrate government agencies, military installations, and critical infrastructure systems. The deep cover operation eventually gathered sufficient intelligence to conduct coordinated international strikes against multiple identity theft networks simultaneously. But the success also exposed Torres to retaliation from organizations that realized they had been infiltrated and compromised. Torres's extraction from the undercover operation required elaborate security measures to protect him from criminal organizations seeking revenge for his role in disrupting their activities and compromising their relationships with foreign intelligence clients. 6 years after Officer Daniel Torres first noticed that burglary victims in Park Slope couldn't remember details about their intrusions, he found himself working in a classified facility beneath Federal Plaza in Manhattan, coordinating international operations against identity theft networks that had evolved into threats to global security and democratic institutions. The facility, officially designated as the Identity Security Operations Center, represented the evolution of his original investigation into a permanent conflict between law enforcement agencies and criminal organizations that possessed capabilities for systematic identity theft on an industrial scale. "We're fighting an endless game," Torres explained to new analysts joining the center's operations. Criminal organizations develop new methods for identity theft faster than we can develop countermeasures, and the information they steal can be used for everything from financial fraud to espionage operations. Torres's daily work involved analyzing intelligence reports from sources around the world, coordinating with international law enforcement agencies, and developing strategies for protecting high-value targets from systematic identity theft operations. The criminal organizations had continued to evolve their capabilities, developing artificial intelligence systems that could conduct comprehensive identity analysis automatically, quantum communication networks that were immune to government interception, and international coordination that allowed them to operate across multiple countries simultaneously. The gap between criminal capabilities and law enforcement resources continues to widen, Torres observed during briefings for senior government officials. They have access to technologies and resources that allow them to conduct identity theft operations at a scale that exceeds what the traditional law enforcement methods can address. The Identity Security Operations Center represented an attempt to create law enforcement capabilities that could match the sophistication of international identity theft networks, but the effort required resources and international cooperation that pushed the boundaries of what democratic societies considered acceptable for law enforcement activities. Torres worked with CIA technical specialists, NSA communications analysts, and military intelligence officers to develop methods for protecting American citizens and government personnel from identity theft networks that served both criminal and foreign intelligence purposes. "We're using intelligence community methods to investigate criminal organizations that conduct espionage operations," Torres explained during congressional oversight hearings. The traditional boundaries between law enforcement and intelligence operations have disappeared because the threats we're facing exceed what conventional policing methods can address. The personal cost of Torres's career evolution included permanent separation from his original life and relationships. The security measures necessary to protect him from sophisticated criminal retaliation required him to live under continuous protection and monitoring that isolated him from normal social interactions. "I've become a permanent target," Torres told the government psychologist during one of their regular sessions. "My expertise in recognizing identity theft operations is valuable to national security agencies, but it's also made me a threat to criminal organizations that see me as an obstacle to their operations." The ongoing nature of the conflict meant that Torres's work would continue indefinitely, as criminal organizations developed new capabilities, and law enforcement agencies struggled to maintain pace with evolving threats. His original observation of suspicious behavior during routine patrol work had led to the discovery of identity theft networks that threatened not just individual victims, but the security of democratic institutions and international stability. Everything began with paying attention to victims who couldn't remember what happened to them, Torres reflected during a training session for new investigators. The lesson is that modern criminal organizations are sophisticated enough to operate without leaving obvious evidence, requiring law enforcement to recognize subtle patterns and persistent anomalies. The Identity Security Operations Center had become Torres's permanent assignment, coordinating intelligence and operations against criminal networks that continued to evolve and adapt to law enforcement countermeasures. But the work also required him to maintain awareness that the methods necessary to fight sophisticated identity theft operations could themselves pose threats to the privacy and civil liberties that democratic societies were designed to protect. "We're walking a narrow line between protecting people from criminal exploitation and creating surveillance capabilities that could threaten the freedoms we're trying to preserve," Torres observed during policy discussions about the future of identity security operations. The balance between security and privacy remained an ongoing challenge as criminal organizations continued to develop capabilities that required corresponding evolution in law enforcement methods and technologies. Torres's career had taken him from street patrol to the highest levels of international security operations, but the fundamental mission remained the same: protecting people from systematic exploitation of their personal information and identities. 8 years after Officer Daniel Torres first responded to Margaret Klein's confused report about someone searching her apartment while she slept, he sat in his secure office overlooking the East River, reviewing intelligence reports that revealed how extensively identity theft networks had penetrated every aspect of modern life. The criminal organizations that had emerged from his original investigation had become a permanent feature of international security threats, requiring ongoing vigilance and sophisticated countermeasures that had transformed the nature of law enforcement and intelligence operations worldwide. Torres's expertise in recognizing systematic identity theft operations had made him one of the most valuable assets in the ongoing effort to protect civilians and government personnel from criminal organizations that could steal and exploit personal information for various purposes. "The work never ends," Torres wrote in his classified journal as he prepared for another international coordination meeting. "The threats evolve, the technologies advance, but the fundamental vulnerability remains. People need to share personal information to participate in modern society, and criminal organizations will always seek to exploit that information for their own purposes." His personal life had been completely absorbed into his professional mission, with security requirements that made normal relationships and activities impossible. The price of expertise in recognizing and fighting identity theft had been the loss of personal privacy and normal social connections. But Torres understood that the work was necessary to protect others from the systematic exploitation that identity theft networks represented. His original instincts about victims who couldn't remember being victimized had led to the discovery of threats that most people never realized existed. "Someone has to remember for those who can't," Torres concluded in his final personal journal entry before beginning another classified assignment. Criminal organizations use memory gaps and confusion to hide their activities from victims and law enforcement. If we don't maintain institutional memory about their methods and develop capabilities to recognize their operations, innocent people will continue to be exploited without ever knowing what happened to them. The Identity Security Operations Center would continue its mission with new personnel trained in the methods Torres had developed, but the ongoing nature of the threat meant that the conflict between criminal identity theft networks and law enforcement would continue indefinitely. Torres's legacy was the understanding that modern criminal organizations possessed capabilities for systematic identity theft that exceeded traditional law enforcement methods, requiring new approaches that integrated intelligence community techniques with conventional policing to protect civilians from sophisticated exploitation. His final assignment would take him back into the international criminal community, where he would continue the dangerous work of understanding and disrupting organizations that threatened the financial security and personal privacy of innocent people through systematic identity theft operations. The eternal vigilance continued, one case at a time, one investigation at a time, one dangerous undercover assignment at a time, protecting people from threats they couldn't remember experiencing and might never realize had affected their lives. As Torres prepared for his next deep cover operation, New York continued its nightly rhythm, unaware that sophisticated criminal organizations were systematically stealing personal information from residents who would never remember being victimized, and equally unaware that dedicated law enforcement professionals were working in the shadows to protect them from exploitation. The endless game persisted, fought by people like Torres who had learned to recognize the subtle signs that revealed systematic criminal exploitation hidden behind legitimate activities, preserving the financial security and personal privacy of urban communities against threats that operated in the spaces where memory failed and evidence disappeared. In his final message to colleagues at the Identity Security Operations Center, Torres wrote, "Trust your instincts when victims can't remember what happened to them. The most dangerous criminal organizations are those that ensure their victims never realize they've been victimized. Memory gaps aren't always natural. Sometimes they're evidence of sophisticated criminal operations that require equally sophisticated investigation methods to detect and disrupt." The message became part of the training materials used to prepare new investigators for the ongoing conflict with identity theft networks, reminding them that the absence of victim memory could itself be evidence of criminal activity requiring investigation. Torres's story had begun with routine patrol work and careful attention to unusual victim behavior, but it had evolved into a career devoted to protecting society from criminal organizations that possessed capabilities for systematic identity theft that exceeded what most people thought possible. The ongoing nature of the threat meant that his work would continue indefinitely, fought in the shadows of legitimate society, where criminal networks operated beyond the awareness of their victims and the detection capabilities of conventional law enforcement. Officer Jessica Park had been patrolling Manhattan's Upper East Side for 2 years when she first encountered the case that would reveal how thoroughly modern technology could be weaponized against unsuspecting victims. It began with what appeared to be a routine domestic disturbance call at a luxury apartment building on East 79th Street. But Park quickly realized she was dealing with something far more sinister than traditional stalking. The victim, Amanda Chen, was a 29-year-old marketing executive who lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the building's 15th floor. When Park arrived at 1:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in September 2021, Chen was visibly terrified and clutching her smartphone with shaking hands. "He's been texting me all night," Chen explained, showing Park a stream of messages that demonstrated disturbing, intimate knowledge of her daily activities. "He knows what I had for dinner, what I watched on Netflix, even what I'm wearing right now." but I've never given my number to anyone suspicious, and I don't know how he could know these things. Park examined the text messages, which had been coming from different phone numbers every few minutes. The content was deeply personal and frighteningly accurate. The Thai food from Sukhumvit looked delicious. You left 3 pieces of chicken on your plate. Interesting choice watching The Crown again. You seem to like that scene with Margaret and Peter. The blue pajamas are a good look on you. Ms. Chen, do you have any idea who might be sending these messages? An ex-boyfriend, co-worker, or someone you've had conflict with recently? Chen's response revealed the first indication that this wasn't ordinary stalking. Officer, that's what's so terrifying. The messages are too specific for someone to just be guessing. He knows exactly what I'm doing in real time, but I live alone on the 15th floor with no direct sight lines from other buildings. I keep my curtains closed, and I haven't told anyone about my evening routine. Park conducted a security check of Chen's apartment, examining windows, doors, and potential surveillance points. The apartment was secure, with no signs of hidden cameras or listening devices. The building had doorman security and electronic access controls that would make unauthorized entry difficult. Ms. Chen, do you use smart home devices, social media, or any apps that might track your location or activities? The question opened a disturbing revelation about how comprehensively Chen's digital life had been compromised. She used a smart TV that tracked viewing habits, a fitness tracker that monitored her movements, food delivery apps that recorded her dining choices, and various social media platforms where she occasionally posted about her activities. I'm careful about privacy settings, Chen insisted. I don't post my location, I don't accept friend requests from strangers, and I use strong passwords for everything. But Park was beginning to understand that traditional privacy measures might be inadequate against someone with sophisticated technical knowledge and access to the interconnected digital systems that monitored Chen's daily life. The stalking escalated over the following week as Park stayed in contact with Chen to monitor the situation. The messages became more invasive and threatening, demonstrating real-time knowledge of Chen's activities that couldn't be explained by conventional surveillance methods. You seem nervous tonight. Your heart rate has been elevated for the past hour. Ordering groceries online instead of going to the store? Smart choice given how late it is. Your sleep patterns have been irregular lately. Maybe you should turn off your phone and get some rest. The stalker's knowledge extended beyond what Chen did to include biometric data that should have been private and secure. Park realized they were dealing with someone who had gained access to multiple digital systems that collected comprehensive data about Chen's personal life. Park's investigation revealed that Chen was not an isolated case. 3 other women in the Upper East Side had reported similar digital stalking incidents over the past month, all involving mysteriously accurate knowledge of their private activities and access to personal information that should have been secure. The pattern suggested a sophisticated technical operation rather than individual stalking cases, requiring expertise in cybercrime investigation that exceeded Park's training. She contacted Detective Lisa Wong from the NYPD's Computer Crime Squad to coordinate a specialized investigation into what appeared to be systematic digital stalking using compromised personal technology. Officer Park, what you're describing sounds like comprehensive digital surveillance using multiple connected devices and online services, Detective Wong explained during their initial briefing. Someone with advanced technical skills could potentially access smart home devices, fitness trackers, social media accounts, and other digital systems to monitor victims' activities in real time. The investigation was about to reveal how vulnerable people had become to digital stalking, in an age when every aspect of daily life was monitored, recorded, and transmitted by interconnected devices that most people trusted without understanding how easily they could be compromised. Detective Wong's investigation into the digital stalking cases revealed a sophisticated operation that exploited vulnerabilities in the interconnected technology systems that had become integral to modern urban life. Working with federal cybercrime specialists, Wong and Park discovered that the stalker had developed comprehensive methods for accessing and correlating data from multiple sources to create detailed surveillance profiles of his victims. He's not just hacking individual devices, Wong explained during a briefing with FBI Cyber Division agent Michael Torres. He's infiltrated the entire ecosystem of connected services that people use daily: social media platforms, delivery apps, streaming services, fitness trackers, smart home systems, even their cell phone location data. The technical analysis revealed that the stalker had gained access to the victims' digital lives through a combination of social engineering, credential harvesting, and exploitation of security vulnerabilities in popular consumer technology. Once inside their digital ecosystem, he could monitor their activities across multiple platforms simultaneously. Amanda Chen's case provided the clearest example of how comprehensive the digital surveillance had become. The stalker had access to her smart TV viewing data, her fitness tracker's biometric readings, her food delivery order history, her online shopping activities, her social media interactions, and even her smartphone's location and usage patterns. The integration of all this data creates a complete picture of someone's daily life. Agent Torres explained to the investigation team. He knows when she's home, what she's doing, who she's communicating with, what she's watching, eating, buying. Essentially everything about her personal routine and preferences. Park's investigation of the other victims revealed similar patterns of comprehensive digital infiltration. The stalker had developed profiles of multiple women in the Upper East Side, all young professionals living alone who used extensively connected technology in their daily lives. He's targeting a specific demographic, Park observed during case review meetings. Professional women in their 20s and 30s who live alone and rely heavily on smart devices, social media, and digital services. They're the most vulnerable to this type of comprehensive digital surveillance. The psychological impact on the victims was severe and unique compared to traditional stalking cases. The women felt completely exposed and violated in ways that physical surveillance couldn't achieve, knowing that their most private activities were being monitored and analyzed by someone with malicious intent. It's worse than feeling like someone is watching you, Chen told Park during a follow-up interview. It's knowing that someone has access to every aspect of your digital life. Your thoughts, your preferences, your routines, even your biometric data. There's nowhere to hide from someone who can see everything you do through your own devices. The investigation took a crucial turn when Wong's analysis of the stalking messages revealed technical signatures that suggested the perpetrator was using professional-grade surveillance software typically available only to law enforcement agencies or corporate security firms. The level of data integration and real-time analysis suggests commercial surveillance software that costs tens of thousands of dollars, Wong told the investigation team. This isn't amateur hacking. Someone with significant technical resources and possibly professional training is conducting these operations. Federal investigation revealed that the stalker was Marcus Webb, a 34-year-old former NSA contractor who had been terminated for inappropriate use of surveillance technology, but had retained access to sophisticated digital monitoring tools through contacts in the private security industry. Webb had been using his technical expertise to conduct systematic digital stalking of women who fit his preferred victim profile, combining multiple surveillance techniques to create comprehensive monitoring capabilities that exceeded what individual victims could detect or protect against. He turned professional surveillance technology into a personal weapon, Agent Torres explained during Webb's arrest briefing. His background gave him access to tools and techniques that are normally used for national security purposes, but he was using them to terrorize innocent women. The arrest of Webb revealed the scope of his digital stalking operation, which had targeted over 30 women across Manhattan over the course of 18 months. Computer evidence showed that he had developed detailed files on each victim, tracking their movements, relationships, and personal preferences with disturbing thoroughness. Park's role in identifying the pattern and coordinating with cybercrime specialists had been crucial to exposing an operation that might have continued indefinitely, as individual victims had no way to understand the comprehensive nature of the digital surveillance they were experiencing. The scariest aspect, Park reflected during the case conclusion, is how completely vulnerable people are to this type of digital stalking. Webb could monitor every aspect of these women's lives using their own devices and services, and they had no way to detect or prevent the surveillance. The case highlighted fundamental vulnerabilities in the connected technology that people depended on for convenience and efficiency, revealing how easily those same systems could be weaponized for systematic stalking and harassment. The Marcus Webb case led to broader investigation by federal agencies into how surveillance technology developed for national security purposes was being misused for personal stalking and harassment. Park found herself working with a multi-agency task force examining the implications of professional-grade surveillance tools being used against civilian targets. Webb's operation represents a new category of stalking that traditional law enforcement methods aren't equipped to handle. FBI Assistant Director Sarah Kim explained during a briefing on the expanded investigation. When stalkers have access to professional surveillance technology, victims become prisoners in their own digital lives. The investigation revealed that Webb had been selling his digital stalking services to other individuals, seeking to monitor ex-partners, business rivals, or other targets. His technical expertise had created a criminal enterprise that provided comprehensive digital surveillance capabilities to customers who wanted to terrorize or control specific individuals. He was essentially running a stalking-as-a-service operation, Park observed during the federal investigation. People could hire him to conduct comprehensive digital surveillance of anyone they wanted to target, using professional tools that victims had no defense against. The scope of Webb's customer base included domestic abusers seeking to monitor ex-partners, corporate executives conducting illegal surveillance of competitors, and even foreign agents gathering intelligence on American citizens. The professional surveillance technology had been commoditized for various criminal purposes. Park's work with the federal task force focused on identifying Webb's customers and helping their victims understand how they had been digitally stalked and what steps they could take to protect themselves from ongoing surveillance. The challenge is that once someone gains access to your digital ecosystem, changing passwords or switching devices might not be enough to stop the surveillance, Park explained to victims during the investigation. They might have installed persistent monitoring software or gained access to multiple accounts and services that you don't even realize are connected. The psychological support for Webb's victims required specialized counseling that addressed the unique trauma of comprehensive digital stalking. Unlike traditional stalking, victims couldn't simply move or change their routines to escape surveillance that was embedded in their technological devices and online services. Digital stalking creates a form of psychological imprisonment, Dr. Rachel Martinez, a specialist in technology-related trauma, explained to the investigation team. Victims feel like they can't escape surveillance that follows them through every aspect of their connected lives. The Webb investigation led to policy changes regarding access to professional surveillance technology and enhanced penalties for digital stalking crimes. But it also revealed fundamental vulnerabilities in consumer technology that made similar operations possible for anyone with sufficient technical knowledge and criminal intent. Park's experience with the case led to her assignment to a specialized unit focusing on technology-enabled crimes, where her understanding of how digital stalking operated became valuable for investigating similar cases and training other officers to recognize sophisticated digital harassment. The Webb case taught us that modern stalking can be invisible and comprehensive in ways that traditional law enforcement wasn't prepared for, Park reflected during training sessions for other officers. When someone can monitor every aspect of a victim's digital life using their own devices and services, the psychological impact is devastating, and the evidence can be difficult to detect. The ongoing nature of digital technology vulnerabilities meant that Park's expertise would continue to be needed as new surveillance tools became available, and criminals found new ways to exploit connected devices for stalking and harassment purposes. 3 years after the Webb investigation, Park was working with federal agencies to develop protocols for protecting high-risk individuals from digital stalking and investigating international cases where similar surveillance technology was being used for espionage and criminal purposes. Digital stalking represents the future of harassment and surveillance crimes, Park told a congressional hearing on technology and public safety. As our lives become more connected and digital, criminals will continue to find ways to exploit those connections for psychological manipulation and control. The Marcus Webb case had begun with routine domestic disturbance calls, but evolved into a comprehensive examination of how surveillance technology designed to protect national security could be weaponized against innocent civilians, requiring new approaches to law enforcement and victim protection in the digital age. Park's career had been transformed by her recognition that digital stalking represented a new category of crime that required specialized investigation techniques and federal coordination, but the fundamental mission remained the same: protecting people from those who would use technology to terrorize and control others. The digital prison that Webb had created for his victims had been dismantled, but the technology and techniques he had used remained available to others with similar criminal intent, requiring ongoing vigilance and adaptation by law enforcement agencies seeking to protect people from the weaponization of their own connected devices.